Welcome to our Oregon State Board of Education. Is this April? Yes, April meeting. Already it's April. I hope everyone is enjoying through the window the sunny day and that you get an opportunity to get outside today and really soak up some of that much needed sunshine that we did not have a lot of during the winter this year. I wanted to start off our meeting by noting that I will be stepping away from this meeting after the board reports, or maybe even in the middle of the board reports because of a previous conflict that I could not fix. But we are really excited to have our Vice Chair, Martina Zapata, take over and chair the meeting. So I just wanted to let everyone know that. So I'm going to start our board reports. Normally I like to come up and be the last because so many things that I hear that you say are so inspiring, and it just really gets us going into our meeting through the right lens of centering everything that we do on this board around our students. But today I'm going to start with some housekeeping, and actually Corey is going to do a roll call, and then we'll start with that's housekeeping, and then I'll jump into my board report.
Thanks, Chair Howard. So I will start with Student Advisor Mahina Novoa.
Here.
Student Advisor Yoselin Arenas.
Here.
School Board Advisor Brandy Penner. Looks like Brandy is not here yet. Okay. Teacher Advisor Monica Rosario Bergman.
I'm here.
Superintendent Advisor Heidi Sipe.
Here.
Ryan Mann on behalf of Treasurer Reed.
Here.
Okay. Emily McLean on behalf of Secretary Fagan.
Here.
Director Jennifer Skurlock.
Here.
Director George Russell.
Here.
Director Jerry Colonna.
Here.
Vice Chair Martina Zapata.
Here.
Chair Howard.
Here.
And Director Gill.
Here, thanks.
All right. So some housekeeping. We spoke last month and about 2 work groups, subcommittees of the board that we're going to form in order to do some of our strategic direction or strategic initiative work. And we have sent out a request to this board to raise your hand and volunteer. We need 2 to 3 people for each of these subcommittees. The first subcommittee is going to be looking at assessments through the lens of our equity lens, and working with our Office of Teaching and Assessment. And then our second group will be led by Vice Chair Martina Zapata, and we'll be researching and investigating best practices, the gold standard, if you will, of dual language and immersive education. And we'll be hearing first, they will be hearing first a report from Eco Northwest that is currently in progress. They will then provide that feedback to the Eco Northwest questions, and bring then recommendations back to this body, this board. So if either of those things sound very interesting to you and you remember seeing the email that we sent out, please let us know. And there was a date in the email, I think by the end of the week or the beginning of next week, which one of those you would like to be involved with. And we would love to have your service in this way. We also wanted to highlight that on April 9th, Director Russell participated on a panel that was called an Assessment Summit Town Hall that was led by Karanja
Cruz.
Yes, thank you, Karanja Cruz, organized by and featured speakers around the conversation of has COVID taught us about teaching, learning, and assessment. And so thank you, Director Russell, for being part of that and lending our board voice to that conversation. We hope that as we learn more from community as well about this conversation around how do we assess basically summatively, informatively, where our students are in their academic journey, but also something that our SEED survey is going to help us understand is what is the student's experience and how is that student experience in working in conjunction or sometimes working against their reaching certain benchmarks. So we're excited about that work. There is one other thing I have on sort of housekeeping, and that is, and I always appreciate Director Colonna sharing things that he hears from community, from the people that trust him, his advice and his knowledge and his experience, and come and share with him. I had some people do the same with me recently, specifically around the ethnic studies standards being rolled out, and really wanting to make sure that it doesn't become cursory, that it's not just an elective class that gets added on to somebody's schedule, that then again, and underline the term elective, that then only the students that elect to take it then end up having the experience. The few people that talked to me did not fully understand that the intention of the standards was it for ethnic studies to be integrated throughout the K-12 experience for every student. And so I know that professional development and the Beloved group has been working on this and how it's rolled out and how teachers get prepared to teach it. But it really, and then that's why it has taken so long to get to this point even. But there's still concern that maybe not all the school districts can and have the capacity to do it in the way that it was intended to be done. I don't know what the role then of this body is, but I just wanted to bring that to the attention of, at this 30,000 foot view, since we were the ones who put the rules in motion and voted to approve those rules, that we can do what we can to influence and support that this gets implemented in the fullness of the intention of the students that first brought it to the attention of the legislature and the legislature that drafted the bill, and then those who worked tirelessly to create the standards. Those of us that were on the board when the rules were first read and voted on. So it's a very, very important part of the work that we are doing, and we just want to make sure that it goes forward, again, for the full benefit of the students. So that is my report today. I am not feeling, the sunshine is making me a little distracted. So I am ready to turn this report over to, I will go to Vice Chair Martina Zapata, and she can either give her report or she can start the reporting with another board member. And again, I will be sort of drifting off the call shortly, but thank you everyone for your commitment to our students. And I look forward to watching a video of this meeting later today. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you, Kimberly. I think I will, the process that Kimberly that Chair Howard has started of reserving her report until the end, I like that practice. I also like to hear everybody's report. So if we could start with other folks on the board, let's do that. And I also love starting with students. So let's start with Student Advisor Mahina Novoa, if we could, please.
Awesome. Well, good morning, everyone. It is a lovely day indeed. So I would just like to start off with kind of like my own information or report about my school and my area. We started off going back to hybrid. So we are going back to school, my bad. And it's been a slow uphill climb, and I'm very happy for that. Unfortunately, one of our sports players has been diagnosed with COVID, so we had to close down sports for a while, but my school's handling it pretty all right. As the end of the year is wrapping up, we're kind of trying to get together on graduation and things like that. It's plans in the making, but we don't know if we can execute them yet. So I will keep everyone updated on that. In public comments, I did hear that there's a lot of support going around with the LGBTQ plus community. And I think that that's something that's awesome to hear about, that we're speaking about that and that we're acknowledging that that day is coming up, the day of silence on the 23rd. And I'm very happy to participate in that and show my support to my fellow classmates. So for that being said, I think I'm going to keep mine short, and that's about it.
Thank you, Mahina. And how about Yosaline?
Yeah, I think it's nice to see everybody. First of all, I love these meetings. It just energizes me so much. And I like to start off with just a student report as well. So my school is actually, we're in person like full time now. And it's been kind of a hectic ride because we first went into hybrid very slowly and planned everything out. And then we went into full time, like very slowly also, and plan things out. And it was really funny though, because we had one schedule and then we switched to another. So it was kind of confusing with schedules. And that's something that, I mean, I think every school is gonna have to like experience a couple times this year. But I love to report that a lot of the kids that were coming to me telling me that they weren't going to graduate and there was no hope for them, like I see them in our Panther Future Center, which helps them graduate and helps them create future plans. And I see them in their like day and night, like trying to get everything sorted. And those amazing women that like are in there trying to help them out and guiding them like, hey, this is what you can do. College isn't for everybody. We can also put you in a trade school. And these kids are finally seeing a future and they're feeling so much more empowered, and they feel like if they're actually going to be able to do something. And that just lightens my world, because I know that they were in such a hard place this year, and hearing them say that they're finally going to continue something with their lives, and just knowing that now they have a reason to get up every morning just makes me really happy. And also I read some of the public comments in support of the LGBTQ plus community, and that just lightens my heart. I have a lot of friends who've gone with some really heartbreaking coming out stories, and a few that have lost their households, and the only place that they were able to go is school, and yet school didn't seem any better for them, which breaks my heart, because it's like if you're abandoned from the whole world, and it truly breaks my heart, because I want to offer them the whole world. And I would be like, no, you're welcome and you're loved and appreciated, and you know, nobody should be treating you different for the way that you feel. And so just knowing that schools are, and we are working towards like a better inclusivity, and including them more into our school learning and bases, like makes me really happy, because knowing how much my friends have struggled, and knowing that I can try hopefully advocating for them really makes me happy. So that's my little spiel for the day. Thank you so much for having me here and to begin with, because I feel like every day is a blessing. So thank you.
Thank you, Student Advisor Arenas. I really enjoy the student reports. I enjoy all of the reports, but the student reports are just super awesome and heartwarming. How about school advisor, Brandy, school board advisor, Brandy Penner?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Yoselina. Seeing the future. You said these students are seeing the future, and that is huge. I think we all are, even adults, right? We're all in need of that perspective and of hope and of seeing the future. So thank you for that. Yeah. Good morning. I apologize for being late. I had rural internet issues, and I'm taking this from the district office here in Newburgh, which is weird to be in another building, but great to be here in this building for this specific meeting. So I'll just give you kind of a quick update on the happenings in the school board world. It's budget season, so this is the time for school boards and their budget committees to meet to start hearing where projections for the upcoming state school fund will be, and of course, to learn about the ever-rising costs associated with healthcare staffing and student needs. Boards across the state are advocating for the $9.6 billion in funding, recognizing that student, staff, and district needs are increasing, even with declining enrollment. And we know that the federal monies cannot fill a hole left from a $9.1 billion budget. So along with the legislative session, boards are paying close attention to budget happenings and to preparing for the possibility of budget shortfalls. As school districts open to more in-person learning, school boards are receiving regular updates, of course, on the rollout status. Board members are monitoring county infection rates and test positivity rates, and of course, following reopening guidelines from the state, while also sometimes administering vaccinations in many locations. So like the State Board of Education, local boards are hearing from our community members about reopening to in-person learning and of course activities. And the overwhelming response has been positive. And as a parent, I, along with my 8th grade son, are very much looking forward to next Tuesday when he will be able to return to some in-person learning in the building that he left 13 months ago. Assessment, data collection are also on the minds of school board members. You know, in a good year, assessments can be a contentious topic. And in this year of considerable change, the discussions of assessments is pressing. As a board member, I rely on district and statewide data to help inform decisions and to see trends within my district. However, I'm also a student of a liberal arts education, and I recognize that assessments and the ensuing data are mired in a complicated web of factors. As board members, we must understand the relevance of the data in the context of the trauma of the last year. And I'm really grateful to see the critical questions that are being asked around what is the data measuring, what's it reflecting, and the overall function and use of academic assessments in our students' educational experience. Of course, equity conversations on school boards are also happening across the state, even in the context of all this work. My board met this last Tuesday evening, and on our agenda for the 8th time was a proposal to change our start times across all of the schools in our district. This process spanned over 8 months, and at the meeting, the board had a rigorous conversation representing various sides of the argument. But what stood out to me was that equity was a part of every aspect of the discussion. After school care, how does this impact families that rely on older siblings to care for younger children? You know, after school activities and jobs, how does this impact kids who depend on sports to motivate them to even come to school? And what about those kids that rely on income from after school jobs? I will be honest with you, my board would not have framed this conversation in terms of equity 2 years ago. And I am generous in saying that it would have been a stretch 1 year ago. We would not have engaged such a broad spectrum of our community in the process. We would not have asked the questions that are being asked in that room. You know, we all brought a perspective and it was not a unanimous vote, but the motion to change our start times to reflect better the needs and wants of our students did pass. And equity groups are springing up in so many different places that none existed before. And for the first time in recent memory, Newburgh has a Black student union, and if not for the first time in history. Our students are organizing, they're telling us what they need to succeed. Students in Grants Pass are telling you what they need. Students in all of our districts are telling us what they need. In the LGBTQ2 SIA Plus resolution, students are telling you what they need. They need safe, inclusive schools with supportive peers and teachers and support outside of the classroom. This is honestly what every student needs, and this is what every human needs. Through poetry, journalism, activism, social media, and engagement with elected officials, the students in our lives are telling us what they need. And it's our responsibility as leaders to listen and affect that change. As always, if you have any questions or want to learn more about what it's like to be a school board member in the year 2021, please reach out. And also, it is still election season. Midterm elections are coming up on the 18th. So please support your candidates in the campaigns in your local school districts that uphold every student's dignity. And be sure to vote, get everyone around you to vote. The election is May 18th, so be on the lookout for your ballots. And just as a reminder, I have my vote sticker on my water bottle today, which I will be sharing with you all throughout the meeting. So don't forget to vote. Thank you.
Thank you, School Board Advisor Penner. And let's move to Teacher Advisor Monica Rosario Bergman.
Thank you, Vice Chair Martinez Zapata. Good morning, everyone, and those community members who have tapped into this meeting today as well. This time of year tends to be one of the busiest in my schedule, and also really reinforces reflection for the work and the progress in this year and what we're hoping to move towards in the coming year. I work with 3 to 5-year-olds and their families in an early childhood special education program. Every spring, we work very closely with the school district, whichever school district is receiving those children who are transitioning on to kindergarten. This is one of their first transitions in their educational experience. They're presently on IFSPs, that stands for Individual Family Service Plan. That's going to transition to an IEP, Individualized Education Plan. You'll notice that there's been one letter dropped out of that acronym, and that letter F stands for family. So this is just a moment to remember that the child as a whole is also part of a family as a whole. And it's important to recognize and consider that F, the family, still as they move on through their school age years. This time also highlights importance for collaboration between ECSC and kindergarten and first grade teachers. It also brings up some questions that, as Brandy Penner mentioned, do highlight some assessment pieces to this. You know, what does it mean to be kindergarten ready? How do we bridge the gap between preschool and kindergarten, or their pre-K experience, whether it's in a program or not? Is my child ready? What does support look like for the child, their family, their teachers? And why do they participate in this readiness test? What information does that give us? Is it useful? So notice how my mindset and my questionings switched from, oh, pre-kindergarten, preschool aged, to assessments really quickly. And that's a really drastic shift for a lot of children and a lot of families with their experience prior to moving into school. I firmly believe that early childhood development is founded in relationships, it's in experiential education and learning, and play. A whole lot of play. Do you guys still play? So that word play really means a lot. It means different things to different people. It looks differently depending on your culture, your expectations, your heritage, your interests. A study in 2017 by a Harvard associate, Dana Charles McCoy, they did a meta-analysis of 22 studies done between 1960 and 2016 that led to the following finding. I know this is a sort of long roundabout discussion and I'm usually pretty brief, but it's really important to me to get this out, especially this time of year. Participation in early childhood education leads to statistically significant reductions in special ed placement and grade retention. That means kids aren't being held back from progressing to the next grade. It also is directly correlated or has a high statistical significance in high school graduation rates. And this has been a topic that's come up very often in the board meeting and just educational conversations in general across the state. So our focus could be brought to this early childhood level because studies also support that things done correctly, things done with structure and intention at this age help to make education more cost effective and provides the opportunity for development for these children to be positively supporting, contributing members of our society in the future. So it leads to having broader vocabularies coupled with stronger language and early math skills. The children tend to be more cooperative in school if they've been in ECE programs. So this brings up, how do you take breaks? Is play a break for you? How do you refill and refresh? Does it look the same as when you were in pre-K, kindergarten, elementary school, middle school, high school? Does the need for those breaks change? Well, my experience is that it's adapted over time for me. It looks different ways sometimes, and sometimes I just want to get in the dirt and play and explore and experiment. So over spring break, I feel pretty fortunate to have had the opportunity to book a completely off-grid experience for myself. So I went and paddled 100 miles through some desert river and surrounded by beautiful sandstone canyons, and it was really filling. And I needed that for recentering after this 13 months of really interesting, challenging, growth promoting time. But is it always a trip like that? It can be a walk through the forest. It could be 30 seconds of mindful breathing. It could be one breath. It could be a mantra I recite throughout the day, or a quick stretching break, or simply sharing a smile or a hug with someone. So as adults, we still take time to enjoy those moments for self-care, to take the breaks, to play, and studies support that these breaks really do increase productivity and overall wellness. Is recess important? Oh man. Again, we look at play in different ways. Recess is priceless. It encourages social interactions and movement. It offers opportunity for unstructured exploration, and it's interest-led experiential moments. So a systemic approach to the practice of playful learning and teaching is really imperative in bridging the gap between the gap that people see between, ooh, play as this unstructured thing, and the emphasis of making sure we cover our curriculum, when the cognitive, emotional, and social capabilities are inextricably intertwined through the life course. And those things are also reinforced by play and the offering of unstructured opportunities. Because this goes through the lifespan and it's not just in these early childhood moments, I would like to step into a conversation with a little bit of compassion and grace, in that some educators in our state were sent an email the evening that spring break started, indicating that they were going back to 5 days a week. And they had 1 week past their spring break to plan for that. Some individuals didn't plan an off-the-grid trip like I made myself do. And they weren't offered the opportunity for a break, the refill. And this has been the case for the last 13 months. I believe that we need these opportunities to establish and maintain healthy boundaries and a healthy work-life balance, and opportunities for what our play looks like in order for us to keep serving effectively all of our students, all of our communities, and all of our families. So really the overall 2 points are, let's really focus on personal wellness, having these conversations with compassion and grace, really fostering a work-life balance, and hold space for those educators who are a lot of is being requested of them right now. And people are feeling pretty empty and they really want to serve. So here's this science from early childhood development that still applies lifelong. Let's keep that in mind in our decision-making and how we move forward. And there's decades of research indicating that there are core developmental concepts that we can use to guide our approach for education throughout all ages. So that all being said, I also very much support the LGBTQ 2+ discussions that are happening right now, both for friends I hold close and dear to me and members in the community who have expressed concern and support for this movement. So thank you. Excuse the long-windedness this morning. I believe it's an important message. Have a good day.
Thank you, Teacher Advisor Bergman. I believe in the long-windedness as well. Thank you for that. Let's move to Ryan Mann on behalf of Treasurer Reed, please.
Thank you. Good morning. Let's have a couple updates to share related to our work. One is just a milestone in the Oregon Saves program. We recently reached $100 million saved by Oregonians through the Oregon Saves program. And I know I've talked in the past about the college savings program. This is a sort of sibling program at Treasury that is focused on helping people save through work for retirement if they don't otherwise have access. So about half of Oregon workers, at least when the program was launched, the surveys found that about half of Oregon workers did not have access to a program to save through work through a payroll deduction. And when people have that option, they're much more likely to do it. So we've got over 100,000 Oregonians enrolled, and collectively they've saved over $100 million so far. It's important because these are by and large folks who have not previously saved or had the opportunity to invest, and they'll now have some level of financial security and or at least some emergency savings to get through hard times. So we've been happy to see that program's momentum has continued through this challenging year, and I think a lot of folks will be in a stronger position because of it. So that's just some fun news to share that we hit the 100 million mark just a few years into the program. Next update is the Treasurer's Financial Education Advisory Team has been meeting throughout the spring, and they have their final scheduled meeting in May coming up in a couple weeks. There's talk about that group continuing in some fashion because there's been a lot of energy in those meetings. And the aim is really to support Oregonians of all ages navigating resources and achieving financial empowerment. So some of that is at the child level and in the K-12 system, how we can sort of infuse some of the financial literacy components into that work, but some of it just spans the lifespan. So that's been exciting to see, and they'll meet again in early May and put out a report with some recommendations on things the state can be doing. And then I wanted to, broadband internet was brought up earlier, and I wanted to briefly touch on that because it's something we've been focused on. You know, we really see it as an equity issue, an economic issue, an education issue, but sort of a unique lens at Treasury. We also see it as something that affects our standing among credit rating agencies. So nationally, when folks are looking at individual states and their financial plans and their sort of stability as a state with their budget, they also look at the state's preparedness to navigate challenging times and to continue momentum into the future. And so one thing they've increasingly looked at is whether or not states have a plan to ensure that everyone has access to broadband internet, because it is so fundamental to education and our economy. And so we've been making that argument, and we'll continue to, because ultimately our credit rating impacts all of our state's finances and our ability to do bonds and to make investments. So it's an important ingredient there, in addition to all the other reasons it's important. And finally, just speaking of investments, the legislature has got a lot on their plate in terms of deciding how to allocate our bonding capacity, and now also a sort of one-time infusion of federal dollars to make sure the state budget is in good shape. But there's also a chance to make some investments in the long term, knowing it's one-time money. How can we stretch it into the future? So that might look like investments in physical infrastructure that we'll use for decades. It might be shoring up some of our resilience efforts, especially related to wildfires, knowing that's not a challenge that's going to go away. And then for me and certainly others and the treasurer, any opportunity to invest in young people and sort of spend money now that will pay dividends down the road and improve the lives of many people. So that's sort of the message we've been sharing with the legislature, and we'll continue to do that. And then I'll just say I continue to be impressed with everyone who's finding a way to navigate all of this that we're experiencing, but particularly helping kids through the various settings in which they're learning. And as schools reopen, the logistics involved are just incredibly daunting, and appreciate everyone who's working on it, and appreciate you all. It's good to be with you this morning.
Thank you, Ryan. And can we move back to Heidi, SIPE, Superintendent Advisor?
Good morning, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here with you all. On Monday, I am excited to share with you that is the start of the fourth quarter of school for us, but it's also hopefully our last first day of school, because we have recreated the school experience 4 times this year. And we are so excited to welcome students back to a more normal experience, whatever the new normal is. But there's a few things I want to take a moment to really shine a light on in the midst of all this, is that in the midst of all 4 of those planning experiences, I've had a team of 33 people from the community, from our school district, from every role in the school district, working together on these various plans. And those people have listened to feedback from the community. They have gathered feedback from the community. They've redesigned bus routes. They've redesigned meal routes. There's so much that goes into reopening school or opening school in new ways. And all of those details they have been focused on. And one of the things that I was so taken aback by this last week is in the middle of all of this excitement, we're also planning our summer opportunities for students and looking at how we can have a screen-free summer school, which we're really excited about. And so we are working on that. I was so excited to hear Monica talking about play, because our focus for K-5 is to reignite the love of learning in our students. So many of them just have Zoom fatigue, as we all do, and we want them to really remember what it's like to love learning and remember what that passion for learning can feel like. So as we're planning all of this, we were very concerned because our staff have been working incredibly hard nonstop, as they have all across the state and nation. And I was very concerned about how many people would be willing to step up and meet all those summer needs. And we're staffed, we're ready. And as of last night, 1/3 of our expected students have already enrolled, and we only released registration last night at 5 p.m. And so we're very excited for all of these opportunities. And I know that as we talk about fatigue and all of the exhaustion that's coming and all of the stress that we've all been going through, I just want to shine a light on the perseverance of our staff, of our students, of our families, and just really give my heartfelt gratitude to everyone who has made all of this work despite all of the changes, because every day we are getting better for kids, and every day we're trying to do more for kids and in new ways for kids, and every day those kids are showing up and showing us their best and trying their best to participate as well. So just huge thanks to all.
Thank you, Superintendent Advisor Heidi Sipe. And now if we could move to Emily McLean on behalf of Secretary Fagan, please.
Good morning, everyone. I am happy to be representing Secretary Fagan here today. We actually just marked her first 100 days in office yesterday. And we are really looking forward to hearing all of the updates today, especially it's been mentioned the LGBTQ2 SIA plus student success plan. And we appreciated the robust public comments submitted this month. There was definitely a clear focus on the concerns and experiences from parents on the impact of the pandemic and all of the transitions on students that Superintendent Sipes just mentioned. Secretary Fagan will be speaking at the Portland City Club at noon on April 27th, and there's a public education focus on this, so I wanted to mention it. At this event, the Secretary will be releasing some new information on Oregon voter attitudes. The Secretary of State partnered on a study with the acronym is EVIC, Early Voting Information Center at Reed College. And the study is in regards to pre and post 2020 general election surveys of Oregonians. So really just learning a lot, and we're excited to share some information with the public. Also, the 2021 election, School Board Advisor Penner has the same energy that we do around the May election. I just wanted to mention April 27th is the last day to register to vote, and ballots will begin being mailed out right after that. The election day is Tuesday, May 18th, as you heard, and ballots must be received at county elections offices or an official Dropbox site by 8 p.m. on election night. So we are just asking everyone to share that information everywhere you can. It's so critical to have that information shared everywhere. We also wanted to say the Oregon Blue Book is being released. Some folks might not be familiar with it. The Oregon Blue Book is the official state fact book about all levels of government in Oregon and much more. And it was first published in 1911, and it's produced by the Oregon State Archives, which is a division of the Secretary of State's office. And I wanted to say that this week, the staff at the office are working to label a book for each school in the state and sending them out to districts, where the districts will then deliver them to the school libraries. So students can access those books across the state. Each community college and public university library also receive one too. And this year's Oregon Blue Book is dedicated to the many Oregonians who have passed away from COVID-19 and their families who loved them. So I hope that you all will take a look at the Blue Book. I also wanted to mention a couple of bills related to civic education that we've been contacted about. Senate Bill 513 that requires 1 semester of civics education in high school, and Senate Bill 702, which requires the next curriculum development process to engage community groups in developing civics and social studies content. The Secretary knows that many education stakeholders are watching and weighing in and providing feedback. We are supportive, but also believe that this is a really broad conversation that all stakeholders really need to be engaged in, which is why we are still working on our own survey of the full landscape of civic education with a focus on addressing misinformation and disinformation and determining what the Secretary of State's unique role and contribution can be. So I wanted to note that. And I also want to say we're also focused on legislation. As Ryan mentioned, the legislative session is very busy and well underway right now. And we're focused on legislation that expands access to our democracy related to issues like voter registration, voting, and ballot access. And just this week, the Secretary testified in support of 2 bills brought forward by Representative Pham related to language access and translation and identifying language and identity on voter registration forms. And she said, you know, when Oregon voters are empowered to make informed decisions with their ballot, they can elect leaders who are responsive to their needs and best represent the communities that they serve. So we're watching a lot of legislation like that I thought might be of interest to folks. And then I wanted to mention Kid Governor, the Oregon Kid Governor, Tanish Garg, who is a 5th grader at Springville K-8, is getting ready to host his first Club BU presentation this Wednesday. And I know we talked about his inauguration this year. And I just want to say that he has been talking with kids in his school about joining this club. And he is keeping folks posted on his blog that I wanted to tell folks about. You might not know. It's or.kidgovernor.org. And Tanish posts a lot of updates on there. And I just wanted to recommend that to folks. He ran for office on the platform of ending racism, and he keeps folks updated on his platform and his efforts and his action around building awareness and communicating and taking action steps to address racism. So I hope you'll take a look at that. He just posted about the Holly Festival, or the Festival of Spring and Festival of Love, that he learned about. So that is what I wanted to share with folks. And just in closing, I did want to say that we know that a lot of folks are thinking about what happened in Minnesota recently, and Secretary Fagan shared recently about Deontay Wright, that a traffic stop should not be a death sentence. And I just know that so many folks are thinking about current events in that regard and really struggling. So our hearts go out, and also our commitment to action goes out to everyone who is dealing with the trauma that's brought up every time someone is harmed and hurt and killed in a traffic stop like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emily. Director Skurlock, would you like to go next, please?
Sure. Hello, everyone. It's always good to see you. I love hearing this the testimonies and stories. It just always inspires my heart. So thank you for this opportunity. I just wanted to briefly share, we just returned to our school district at Eugene School District 4J, just returned to in-person teaching hybrid model. And so we did that this week. So we have 2 cohorts. That one cohort meets Mondays and Tuesdays in person. And then the second cohort meets Thursdays and Fridays in person. And then we have a third technically cohort, the online students who are in our classrooms via Zoom. I will not lie to you, it is challenging, especially if you're a teacher that likes to move around. And so I have to be cognizant to stay in front of my desk area so my students who are online can see me. And then I have a microphone where I can go around to the students so that the students who are online can hear the students who are in the classroom sharing. But if I leave my station, then the students don't see me and they're just hearing me and they're looking at some posters in the back. So it's definitely tricky. So everything has to still be plugged in online via Canvas, setting everything up. And so it is tricky, but I will say this, it has been beautiful to see students, to see their faces, even though they're covered in masks. It just brings me so much joy. So I'm really excited to see my babies in person. I am also equally excited about the opportunities to provide student voice. And I'm a firm believer that every school should have GSA, BSUs, LSUs, Asian Pacific Islander student unions, theater, sports, faith-based youth groups, what have you, where kids have a chance to speak up, to share, and to be heard. And so all of the conversations we're having about the LGBTQ+, one thing that I'm proud of that has happened across our state is we have student unions that support student voice, uplift student voice, where students feel like they belong, regardless of what group they identify with. And bottom line, when those groups are supported by educators, our students are empowered. Their educational, not only opportunities, but the whole experience becomes brighter, better, stronger, because they know that someone is advocating for them. And so I'm so excited about that. And I'm excited about what we're doing here in our state. I was thinking about the importance of just feeling safe in a learning environment, feeling safe in a school, community, even in the midst of George Floyd and other things that have happened, just the need to feel safe. And our students are saying that if they don't have the supports, they don't feel safe. And so we must do everything we can to make sure, not only following Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but making sure that every student is treated with dignity and respect, and that every student can come into a space and be loved and honored and challenged and believed in as they come into our educational environments. The last thing I wanted to share is something that came up with my students around testing. And I had a chance to meet with a kiddo and I said, hey, how are you feeling about testing? And I said, are you okay if I share your story? And he said, yes. And so I'm going to refer to this kiddo as Sam. Okay. I said, how do you feel about state testing, standardized testing? And he said, in honesty, he said, it really stresses me out. And he shared that he's a student who's on an individual education plan, so receiving special ed services. And he said that writing exams really stress him out. And he said oftentimes he would just speed through the exams just to finish and be done with it because he would experience so much anxiety when it came to testing. And he also talked about, not only feeling stressed out, but feeling like he needed to take breaks, but didn't know, if he could take breaks and wasn't sure how to navigate through that. And then also not wanting to feel, singled out or stand out in front of his peers. His goal was really, in essence, in his conversation, to blend in. And I thought about that, and he's not the only student that shared those types of concerns. And I thought about how we could strategically work through assessments that are based on the curriculum that's provided in our classes, very similar to what the IB program has done, where certain assessments are based on the curriculum that's provided through the coursework. And then that also counts, and it's not necessarily based on, everything's not necessarily based on the additional IB exam. And I was thinking about that at the state level, how we can support kids so that they can feel safe. Because when we create these testing environments, in honesty, the rooms look very sterile. I have to cover up all of my walls with black poster paper. I have to remove all of these things, spread the kids out. There's so much protocol to follow. And the kids, I literally see these vibrant, vivacious, talkative kiddos become very silent. And they're like, why are we doing this, Mrs. Why are we doing this? And then hearing feedback from parents, what is this? Why are we doing this? This really isn't benefiting my kiddo. And so I hope that we can continue to engage in conversations to support kiddos like Sam and other students, where we need to make sure, if we're asking them to do things, that we're valuing their student input, valuing their voice. And when they're saying these assessments aren't really helping me, we need to really consider why we do what we do and make changes to, once again, support our students and support student voice. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Scurlock. Director Russell, would you like to go next?
Thank you. Good morning to all, and good seeing you. I will try to be a little briefer. You know, in spite of some of the challenges and things that folks have talked about in terms of students returning to school, I do have to say that it touches my heart to see school buses running and to see kids on their way to school, to see the parking lots filled with staff and in some cases student vehicles, and to know that our kids generally are back in school in some way or another. It kind of makes the community feel like it's coming back to life in many ways, to know that our schools are starting to come back to life. So recognizing that there are a number of issues around it and that it's not working perfect and that there's still a long way to go to get out of this COVID stance, it still is touching to see that we're starting to move in that direction. Quick few items. One, after our last board meeting, I think Jerry had previously mentioned to you that he and I are kind of co-hitting on sitting on the OSBA board. And it just so happened that right after our last meeting, there was an OSBA board meeting that I got the chance to attend. It was very brief, a couple of quick topics. I don't think it lasted even a half an hour before they went into exec session, but some positive comment about the Every Student Belongs rules that we've adopted and the language that we've developed with that. They spent a lot of time of that planning the summer session, OSBA board session. So that was a good meeting and I was glad to be able to attend. I got a couple of other quick things I want. One is I want to mention that since I've retired, I've kind of continued to stay connected with some organizations over the years. And one of those has been the National Superintendent's Roundtable. And they continue to do some things that I find worthwhile. And most recently on March 25th, they had a Zoom presentation by an economist named Rucker Johnson from Berkeley, who did a presentation about money matters and how much it matters in education, public education. And he outlined his detailed examination tracking the achievement of 6.5 million students in 10,000 California schools, and how money was spent on them over 5 years under their state's spending formula. And he demonstrated that money that is targeted to schools with high concentration of low-income students and sustained over time substantially improves student performance in reading and math in every grade from 3 to 11. Such funding also significantly improves high school graduation rates and shows that money does matter in terms of schools and the kind of performance that we want from our students. So it was a very good presentation, in fact. The next thing, and I think Board Chair Howard mentioned it, is I did get the opportunity to sit in as a panelist for Karanja Cruz's Teaching with Purpose panel on assessment. And it's interesting that so many of you have brought this up because it was a very interesting panel and presentation. It started off with Karanja kind of setting the stage and the context. And then there was an interesting presentation by a teacher named Chris, I think it's Reiser is how he pronounces it. And he talked about the history of assessments going back to Binet and intelligence testing through SAT tests and so forth. And basically the concept that whiteness was at the center of a lot of our standardized testing and assessment. He talked about the Nation at Risk Report, National Education Summit, and so forth, and the race to the top and the Common Core standards, smarter, balanced, and so forth, and came from a standpoint that there's a lot of cultural bias and racism, systemic racism from his view that's built into standardized and annual assessments. Then our own Dan Farley spent some time talking about where the state is on assessment, and that he continued to take a look at it, and he talked about the difference between formative assessment, interim assessments, and the standardized tests that we do, and so forth. And then part of the burning question on the table from a number of the folks was the Ecsc requirements, and what flexibility does the state have or not have under Ecsc. And I thought Dan did a nice job of handling that. And then again, our own Colt Gill did a great presentation around what's happening with testing now and what we're doing with Ecsc and what the department is doing, and talked about the essential skills waiver that we looked at the state board and so forth. And I shared a few comments, and then Lindsay Camps from the governor's office spoke. But I think the key part was there was a teacher from Portland, there was a principal, and a student who spoke about their own experiences with testing. And as you might imagine, the most impactful part was to hear from the student. And Jennifer, the comments you just made reflected pretty much what she said. And that she had been advocating, according to her, for several years to do something different with standardized testing. And her concern that she had siblings who were coming up in the system. She was graduating this year, but she was concerned that after 3 or 4 years of advocating for some change, that the same system would appear to be in place for her younger siblings as she went along. And then lastly, we had a keynote from Rick Stiggins, who some of you know. Rick is an assessment kind of specialist and has done a lot of work in the state, worked on the 2015 report that came out of the joint efforts of OEIB and OEA and so forth, that came out with the report that was, and I think Heidi, you were a part of that as well, and some others. And some conversation, okay, so how far have we moved since that, and what's happening with that, and so forth. And then just lastly, I'll end that by saying Rick volunteered that with the assessment subgroup that the board is putting together, if there's any information that group needs, he'd be happy to provide that and work with the group. And he did provide me with some of his slides that he has, and if anybody's interested in those, I can make them available. So that's my part for the day. Thank you.
Thank you, George. I think there is interest from several of us for that information, so we'd love to get it.
I did have, can I add one more last piece? I did want
Yes.
to just say, and it's more of a question. I did with interest read the information that Colt sent out about the changes in the department with the early learning, the early ed department, early childhood department becoming a separate department from ODE. And it does raise a number of questions in my head, and I hope that Colt at some point will discuss those, but I'm particularly concerned about what impacts or effects there might be on early learning programs, preschools, those kinds of things that are related to our public school systems and what's happening with early learning and those areas as this kind of fracture takes place. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Okay, Director Colonna.
Thank you very much, Ms. Vice Chair. I certainly appreciate the time that we have together today. It's an honor to be with all of our colleagues. I have 3 items I'd like to mention to the group. One is about some quotes from some of our letters. The other is 2 agenda items that we'll be working on today that I think are fascinating. And the third thing is a quote for the day for leaders, which I think you'll enjoy. Let me start with the letters by saying that this time, as you know, there were many fewer letters. I think there were only 18, and we've had, I think in the height, somewhere close to 150 letters per month. But it was crucial this time as we looked at the letters to make sure that we saw the date that the letter had been written, because so many things were happening from day to day and changes that some of the concerns that people had, thank goodness, were taken care of by actions through the department and the governor's office and within school districts. There were a couple that I'd like to mention that I feel are significant issues. First of all, I do want to appreciate Lisa Schimhauer's research and sites and COVID-19 statistics. She wrote 4 individual letters to us. And I think when people put the time in to help us understand different points of view, especially going through research and sending us items to look at, it's impressive and it's very helpful. A couple of quotes that caught my eye. One is from Sandra Andrews, and she says, "Everyone is always gabbing about how they follow the science, but the truth is they only follow the science that suits them when it suits them." And that's an interesting perspective. And I think all of us have seen that being somewhat positive and somewhat negative. But I think it's an important point for us to keep in mind as we navigate through the challenges that the virus gives us. The second quote that caught my eye is from Stephanie Smith. And she said, "Many large school districts in Oregon are providing the minimum required of them in terms of reopening and will not provide more in-person education until told that they have to do so." Again, a perspective that we need to keep in mind and understand from various points of view. Certainly, the district level has some different views on this than maybe this writer did, but our job is to listen to all and make the best decisions that we can. The 2 agenda items that I find absolutely fascinating this time, one deals with the Lamond Charter School waiver, a really interesting kind of conundrum of determining whether the waiver would allow teachers to not have licenses at all. And I think at the state level, there has to be at least 50% of the teachers licensed in a public charter school. There's some impressive reasons as to why they are asking for this waiver. And there's some very interesting district perspectives that see the other side. So I'm going to look forward to our discussion on this and the staff presentation. But one thing I'd like to say, and I try to point this out, this was a beautifully written analysis of the problem, both from the point of view of the district, the individual staff members from the charter school, and also our own staff's presentation. So well laid out, so carefully giving points of view for us to use as we make our decision. And then the other one is House Bill 2762 that deals with flexibility for districts when they use polystyrene food product plates and containers and packaging. And the issue is really interesting from the perspective of districts. The law was passed in 2015. So I kind of wonder why after 6 years, there needs to be flexibility, but there's some good rationale there. So again, it's another topic that wouldn't be on most people's minds, kind of maybe in the weeds a bit, but Earth Day is around the corner. The environment is important. And so it is a real issue. I would like to end with a quote that I think you'll enjoy. It's for all of us who are in leadership roles and responsibilities, and it goes like this: be decisive, right or wrong, make a decision. The road of life is paved with flat squirrels who couldn't make a decision as to stay in the middle of the road or run to either side. Have a wonderful rest of the meeting. I look forward to serving each of you, and this is a special time each month. And thank you very much for all everybody brings to the meeting, all the background work that goes to make the meetings possible, and especially to the staff who work so hard to help us in our roles. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jerry. And I actually would like to know the source of that quote. I love it. And I want to be able to use it.
It's one of those things where people send you a whole bunch of, like, here's some pictures you'd enjoy, or here's some quotes. And so this one came through with a whole series of them, and there wasn't any connotation to it, but I'll bet if I do a little bit of Google work with it, I might be able to find it. So here's what I'll do. I will do some research and see if I can find where it came from, and I'll also write the quote and send it on to Corey so that he could send it on to the rest of the group, and if I can get a site for it. But I have it taped on my computer here to take a look at each time I come to the computer. So it helps me in that regard. And it also helps me not to be too decisive, to take time as well. So both sides of it are interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Second Vice Chair Wheeler, would you like to share with us your report?
Absolutely. Good morning, as always. It's an honor to be here. I apologize for my tardiness this morning. One thing I won't miss about Zoom or working remote is the Wi-Fi drill that we all have in the back of our head when Wi-Fi crashes. And so I did shave 2 minutes off my response time this morning trying to make it somewhere to connect. So I'm at my mom's, which is great because it gives me some time to chat with her during lunch. So one thing I wanted to share this morning, and I promise it is connected to education if you give me a couple minutes to talk in a circle. I am not just the education director for the Coquille Tribe, I'm also the cultural resources director for the tribe. And one thing that is extremely important to tribes is our cultural resources. And there are so many, but one thing I want to talk about specifically are cultural items and artifacts. And what a lot of tribes do is consult with agencies when we look at archaeological sites and protection of these resources that will not be around forever. They are not renewable resources. We know that for hundreds of years, families have come across archaeological sites or collected items. And a lot of these items from tribes reside in people's homes, in museums, and in our schools and in our state institutions. And these are items that are so invaluable and important to tribes. And those are things that are made and crafted by our ancestors. And those are items that help heal our students and our tribal youth and our tribal people. Not very many of those items ever come back to the tribes. And we always hope and pray that they're treated with care and with love. But recently in 2017, there was a bill passed. And I want to talk about that bill right now. I'll read that. Sorry, I'm at my mom's and her phone's ringing. In November 2017, Governor Kate Brown signed Executive Order number 1712, establishing the Task Force on Oregon Tribal Cultural Items. The task force works with the governor's office to solicit information from state agencies and other public institutions about the items within their possession that are associated with Oregon's 9 federally recognized tribes. In the first phase, most state agencies turned in an inventory of these cultural items in their possession or their management. Phase 2, which is what the stage they're in now, it expands that work to the universities and community colleges. Future phases will see those efforts extended to K through 12 and other public institutions. And so this is an effort by a lot of the tribal chairs in Oregon and cultural resource teams to be able to work with schools and with state institutions to see what it is that are in these office buildings and what can be shared or provided in this inventory to be shared with tribes. We have things that are very sensitive, like human remains that reside in some schools. We have Native American schools that are in science classrooms, and this is not where those things should be. And so I just want to preface this work with a really heartfelt thought and idea around the importance and the connection of these items to tribes, and to start preparing for what does that look like in our schools, and how are we going to respond to that, and the science and the emotional and the spirit around it. So hopefully we will start having conversations with school districts at some point and continue this work across the state. So I thank you for your time today, and I'm excited about our agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Second Vice Chair Wheeler. I mean, the wealth of information that we gain with such a diverse group on the board is just beautiful and astounding. So we're running a little behind, but I think we're still good on time, or so assures me Corey. so I'm gonna proceed with my report. Quiero empezar mi informe en español para enfatizar la suma importancia de hablar más de un idioma. En nuestro país y en nuestro estado ha sido la costumbre y opinión de nulificar cualquier idioma que no sea el inglés. Es en particular los idiomas que no son occidentales. Resulta así el menosprecio no solo del idioma, sino de nuestros niños, cuyo primer idioma no es el inglés. Tan grave es el sentimiento para los niños en desarrollo que muchos aprenden a perder su autovalor o por lo menos también menospreciar el valor de su idioma natal o de su hogar. Este proceso es el inicio de su decadencia y falta de participación en la escuela. Nuestros idiomas, no solo el español, sino también las lenguas indígenas, tanto como cualquier otro idioma conocido en el mundo, son de supremo valor. Nos ayudan a entender mejor nuestros alrededores y a desarrollar mejor nuestra comprensión en general. Es una joya sin valor igual el saber más de un idioma. Many years ago, I stumbled across a Great Books Foundation publication titled A Latino National Conversation. I'm going to show it to you guys briefly. Readings on Assimilation. It was a book and discussion guide that I used for many years to help my Latino students understand and navigate education and the world around them, which was intent on diminishing their value, among other reasons, because of the language that they spoke. I want to share with you a poem from that publication this morning. It's a poem titled My Native Costume by Martín Espada, a Puerto Rican poet, writer. When you come to visit, said a teacher from the suburban school, don't forget to wear your native costume. But I'm a lawyer, I said. My native costume is a pinstriped suit. You know, the teacher said, a Puerto Rican costume. Like a guayabera, the shirt, I said, but it's February. The children want to see a native costume, the teacher said. So I went to the suburban school, embroidered guayabera, short-sleeved shirt over a turtleneck, and said, look, kids, cultural adaptation. Now I want to share with you two images that I've seen in the media since our last meeting. Without intentionally looking for them, just opened up my news apps and they were there. So indulge me again with sharing a little bit more. I'm going to share my screen so that you can see these two articles that I found. The first one, breaking news, the US is sending millions of surplus doses of AstraZeneca coronavirus vaccine to Mexico and Canada, officials said. And this is the image paired with that title, with that heading. The second article, daughter of Purepecha Mexican tribe earns full ride to Harvard. In the first paragraph, Elizabeth Esteban's mother's first language is the Purepecha dialect from Michoacán, Mexico. She is expressing how proud, etc., etc. It's a beautiful article that really displays something that should be applauded. Now, they likely speak for themselves, these two articles, but I'm going to briefly explain them. The image on the first article has nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do with the content of the article, but does depict Mexicans as border jumpers, I've been called that, or running from the law. Undocumented immigration, like every other human story, is not a single lens or unidimensional story. The second article speaks of a grand civilization and a language as a tribe and a dialect. Did we ever refer to the Romans or the Greeks as a tribe or their language as a dialect? Nothing wrong with a tribe or a dialect, but I want to frame the truth and reality of this particular group, of this particular civilization. Elizabeth Esteban now appears as the image of the miracle child rather than someone who could be the norm or someone who needs to be normally applauded for her laudable achievements. These are not obscure publications. You saw, one of them is the New York Times, the other one is CNBC, I believe. And they are prominent, help form the images and concepts that we have of the growing number of children we have in our K through 12 classrooms. and of the people like myself. It takes a stellar amount of insulation to protect our psyche and our self-worth as a result of this bombardment. Standard dual language instruction or compulsory bilingual education in Oregon is long past due. It is a benefit to all children of Oregon. I am over the moon excited that our state board and our Department of Education have committed to starting the work of honoring the linguistic representation of our state. We have to continue to be steadfast in changing the culture that harms all of us in the long run. I also wanted to mention, by the way, that Chair Howard wanted me to indicate that it is the Education Northwest agency that has partnered with the Department of Education to do the initial study on compulsory bilingual education. Chair Howard erroneously referred to it as ECHO Northwest. So I also want to share my delight, as several other people have mentioned, with the LGBTQ2 SIA plus Student Success Plan. For too long, my brother had to endure the chastising of being too feminine for his gender. Something inherent in his person and identity. He, like all of the other LGBTQ plus children in our schools, needs support and need to be treated with dignity. It's school board election season. I can't begin to describe how exciting it is to see people of color running for these seats. Don't forget to vote, just as several of the other members have mentioned already. And finally, I save this for the end because I can't help but get triggered and become very emotional with situations like this. But I speak today with a heavy heart, with the knowledge that the murder by law enforcement of yet another Black man is in the headlines. It could have been my 21-year-old son, my 21-year-old Black son. It could have been one of my 2 Black nephews. Dante Wright was someone's son and father. Thank you all for being here today and for sharing the fantastic information that you do with us and with our public in Oregon. Okay, I think after I compose myself for 2 seconds, we can go to a 5-minute break before we return with Director Gill's director's report. And we shall be back at 10:35. Is that fine, Corey? Does that work? 10:35, everyone. Welcome back, everybody. We will now hear from Director Gill with the director's report.
Thank you, Chair. I think I will actually invite our legislative director, Jessica Ventura, to give the first part of the report, just a legislative update.
Thanks, Colt, for punting it over to me. I always appreciate that. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jessica Ventura, Government Relations Director for the Department of Education. I'm going to share my screen really quickly, so bear with me for one moment here. I'll try to make this quick, and I know that a few folks had some questions about very specific bills, so I'll try to do that at the very end. So I wanted to let you know sort of where we are in the process. So we are here in April, which, as you can see, we're halfway through the process. So we just made and passed a big chamber deadline, which was on the 13th. So that means that any of the bills that were introduced in one of the either chambers had to make it out of that chamber to continue on in the process. So while I would like to report that our universe has gotten smaller it actually has not. There were around 500 bills that we were tracking at the beginning of session, and we're now down to 298. So still a lot of bills that are out there alive that are relating to education, which tells me that maybe about half of those will make it through. So that means that for you all in the fall, it's going to be very busy for the State Board of Education as you're thinking about rules and staff are presenting these before you. I also imagine that our Rules Advisory Committee will also be very busy as staff are also presenting the rules before them. So that's sort of where we are. May, the next couple deadlines are going to be May 14th. And then the second chamber deadline will be May 28th. And then there's just a countdown till session ending on June 27th. So just a quick reminder of our bills. We started with about 10 bills and we lost one, but have gained many others along the way, which is usually part of the legislative process. But just super excited to let you all know that House Bill 2052, which is tribal regalia and objects of cultural significance, as well as access to linguistic inclusion, House Bill 2056, will have its first public hearing, I believe, either on Monday or Wednesday of next week. So we already are working really hard with our coalition partners and our associations to get them to come out and support both of these bills. They both come with a lot of support from the House, so we don't. I don't foresee any issues in the Senate as of today, so hoping to get these out as soon as possible. Our big technical fix bill, House Bill 2060, is still in House rules, so just waiting for that one to be publicly heard. House Bill 2166, which is the Racial Justice Council bill on education, that bill also is in House rules, waiting for a few amendments, so I can come back next month to see which ones of those will be moving forward. And then, Senate Bill 52, you'll have the plan today that is up for consideration of adoption. That one is still in Ways and Means sub-education. The sub-ed is still going through their budget hearings at this point. And they will probably start hearing policy bills, I would say mid-May. So more to come on when folks can sign up to testify for that. And then Senate Bill 55, which is the statewide facilities assessment, is also in Ways and Means. Since I last talked to you all last month, we picked up one bill, Senate Bill 226. Senator Dempro was so gracious to allow us to come and amend this bill and add the biliteracy seal. So you all have adopted biliteracy seal within rules. We are now trying to put that into statute to give us the ability to get a 0.5 FTE. So that will go over to Ways and Means, and then we'll work with Rick and folks in Ways and Means to see if we can get that position. Super excited to say that the Every Student Belongs bill passed with unanimous support from the House on Saturday. If you have not had an opportunity to go back and listen to the floor speech, I would definitely recommend for you all to do that. It now goes to Senate Education, so we'll be working fast and furious as well to get that out of Senate Education. Access to school meals, which is another Student Success Act. Technical changes also made it out of the chamber yesterday, so that one will go over to Senate Education. And then we got permission from the governor's office to support the Racial Equity and Justice Student Council, which is created by House Bill 3363. Super excited about that. That one heads over to Ways and Means. In Ways and Means, we also have House Bill 2057, which clarifies our grant-making authority for the department. And then our two technical changes around regional programs, Senate Bill 53 and then Senate Bill 155, those are now headed to the House. Senate Bill 51 will go to House Human Services, and then Senate Bill 53 will go to House Education. And Representative Neron has agreed to champion this bill for us on the House side. So excited to partner with her on that. So I think I kind of gave you a good overview of where we are, and I believe that there was a couple questions that sort of came up as you all were giving your reports. So I think I will start kind of echoing some of the things that some of the comments around rural broadband. So that we have been invited to the Joint Ways and Means Economic Development. And I believe that public hearing will be next week. We'll be providing testimony on digital literacy, access, security, and inclusion. and that presentation will be put forward by Rick Krager. So we're working with him to get that out there. And as Emily mentioned, Senate Bill 5513 and Senate Bill 7114 both have no fiscals on ODE, so those are headed over to House Education. So we're just sort of waiting to see what the House and sort of where members are falling on that as well. And I believe there were questions around House Bill 3073. That one would create the Early Learning Authority. So that is what the name that will be changed for the new agency that will be created under this bill. That was publicly heard, I believe, on Monday or Tuesday of this week. I can't remember which day. But that one is also headed to House Rules as well for further consideration. So 3 big policy bills in House Rules, and we'll be in there pretty frequently trying to get those 3 out. But that's pretty much it. If there's any other further questions, I will point out that you do have 2 letters that were submitted for public records on the LGBTQSI+ plan from OEA and Senator Lieber in support of those 2. So just wanted to make sure to highlight that for you too. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and let me know if there's any questions. And as I was saying that, Representative Salinas just emailed me her letter of support of the LGBTQSI+ plan. So I'll send it out to the group as well.
Great, thank you, Jessica. And I do think that they, in some of the amendments on 3073, that they updated the name of the new agency as well. So I'm looking for it in the amendments. So sorry to have that.
Yeah, what I will say
Department
though,
of Early Learning and Care is what's in the -3 amendments. So.
Okay. And what I will say is that if the committee that passed out the bill just had a lot of support around the idea of creating the Department of Early Learning. So I believe that there's a lot of energy behind, and I got the sense that this is a priority for the committee and for rules to get this passed out at this session. And Colt and Miriam also sent a letter of support around to the agency, and just a lot of energy behind that.
Okay, all right, thank you, Jessica. And I will share a little bit more information. Okay. So we had the legislative update. I also wanted to share a quick school operation status so you can see how schools are operating here in Oregon right now and where we're headed next. Some information on all the federal resources that you continue to hear about in the news, so I can share with you what those are and how they'll be used here in Oregon. There's some summer learning opportunities through another bill that was passed, 5042A, and is now, I believe, still awaiting the governor's signature, but we're making moves to get these funds available to school districts and community partners as quickly as possible. So I'll walk through some of that with you. And then there's an opportunity related to something that the chair said earlier in the meeting about the value of diversity on the State Board of Education. And so I'll share that with you as well. On our website, we keep an updated information around, so I'm going to drop something into the chat for you so you can see where this is at on our website. We keep updated information around how schools are operating each week. So each Friday, schools send in a report to the Department of Education and let us know how they operated the week prior. We work with the Oregon Health Authority to place these on a map. So this map represents all of our public schools here in Oregon with a colored dot. Each of the colored dots tells you how that school is operating. So and on the website, you can click on the dot and see what school that is. You can zoom in and zoom out and find your community. The red dot means they're operating in comprehensive distance learning only. The orange means that they have comprehensive distance learning with some limited in-person instruction. On this map, those are typically middle schools and high schools right now. The yellow means that they're operating in hybrid, and the green means they're fully in person with every student attending every day. The colors of the counties relate to what the community spread looks like in those communities, and it helps to direct those school districts around if they're newly opening, how they should be opening, and if they're currently opening, how they need to process that information and consider any kind of return to comprehensive distance learning. So right now we have 28 states or 28 counties that are in our green, meaning they have 200 cases per 100,000 or less, a case rate, and have pretty, what's considered for school systems, low community spread. And we have 7 that are in the yellow. This is telling us that we need to be really cautious about middle and high schools being open to in-person instruction. And we have 1 county, Klamath County, in our red zone, which tells us we need to be really thoughtful about all the schools that are open. This move towards in-person instruction came from the governor's executive order 21-06. So since that came out in mid-March, we've tracked how many schools have moved to operating either fully on site or in hybrid. We have about 331 additional schools operating in that way since that time. Next week is the week that we will likely see this number climb again significantly. Next week is when middle schools and high schools are required to begin serving in-person instruction in some format. Always throughout the spring, families can choose to remain in comprehensive distance learning, and all districts are working really hard to maintain both of those programs, which is a huge lift for our school districts because they don't have additional staffing that they can bring on the last few weeks of the year. So all of them are working really hard to both provide this in-person instruction and for families that choose of the comprehensive distance learning model. So right now, about close to 270,000 students in Oregon attending fully on site or in hybrid. When you include those that in limited in-person instruction, we get close to 300,000. And again, we'll likely see this number climb significantly over the next 2 weeks when more middle schools and high schools are operating in that way. I'm switching over to some of the funding that is available or has been available to our school districts. The elementary and secondary schools emergency relief, that's what ESSER is the model that these funds have come to school districts in Oregon. And they've come in 3 separate acts. First one was the CARES Act, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. The second one was the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. And then the final one is the American Rescue Plan Act. And so with each one of these acts, ESSER has grown in size. It was in the summer of 2020 when we were able to release the funds from ESSER 1 directly to school districts. Most of these funds do go directly to school districts. There are some state set-asides that are allowable. Those are now coming with some direction around how those dollars need to be spent. Currently, we're distributing the ESSER $2, so about $450 million to school districts. And then the spring and summer will be addressing ESSER 3, which is the $1 billion investment from the federal government. So I wanted to walk through how some of those funds are being used. In the CARES Act, ESSER 1, you can see again that most of the funds go directly to the schools. That's about 110 million. We do have some funds that we put out to other school systems in Oregon that aren't included in the district formula grant. So the district formula grant that sends that first $110 million out is defined by federal law. And it's those funds are distributed to school districts based on the Title I allocations, so another federal grant. We have a handful of school districts in Oregon that don't receive a Title I allocation. They're small school districts. They're often school districts that do serve students who are economically disadvantaged, as do Title I school districts. So we have supported some funds to support those schools. Also schools that are state-sponsored charter schools or the Oregon School for the Deaf that are not included in the allocation. And then the state specialized service programs that serve students in early intervention, early childhood special education programs, and regionalized programs for students who experience certain disabilities, in programs that serve students who are in youth correction or juvenile detention facilities. So all of those programs are supported by these funds as well. We've also had a really strong partnership with our education service districts, where they have expanded the reach of the department to support school districts in their on-site operation and their development of comprehensive distance learning through using what's called ESD reopening advisors. And so we have funds put in here directly to support those efforts as well. I'm not actually, you have access to this slide deck, so I'm not going to go through line by line about the allowable uses. But what I will say is that the use of these funds is pretty flexible for school districts. So it is almost anything related to addressing COVID-19 issues, from purchasing face coverings and other kinds of PPE that are needed, to providing mental health supports for students, to providing additional learning opportunities, extended school day or summer programs. And there are a number of places in the eligible uses that call out the disproportionate impact of students of color, students who are part of, are members of tribes, students who are experiencing houselessness, or foster care, or navigating poverty in some way, students who are emerging bilingual, English learning students, and students who experience disability. So there is a real focus there in an effort to support disproportionately impacted individuals and families, either disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, by our state's response to COVID-19, or by the education system overall. ESSER 2, again, was a bit more money, so $450 million that is being released to districts right now. We're again supporting our education service district partners that are directly supporting schools across the state. We are supporting the Oregon School for the Deaf and the 4 state-sponsored charter schools in the same way that other school districts are served, and those specialized programs for students that I talked about previously. We're also have been funding a statewide public awareness campaign that is designed to inform and not influence. So this is a campaign that is letting community know everything that schools are doing to help ensure that they are as safe as possible and are reducing risk of spread at the school site. But they aren't designed to push people to come to school. In fact, many of them say, we're ready when you make that decision that you want to return to school. In the ESSER 2, they added 3 allowable uses for those funds. They focused in on addressing learning loss. And again, I'll talk about our reframing of that. But again, this is really designed to support students, especially the focal student groups that I named previously, in ensuring that they have full access to education and extended access to education. They also noted school facility repairs and improvement related to COVID-19, and to provide additional services around mental health and behavioral health supports, and to improve indoor air quality. Now what we're moving to is getting ready for ESSER 3, which is the largest. So this comes from the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, a lot of people call it. So this is $1 billion that will go directly to schools, again, through the same formula grant. We are again hoping to serve those students that are served in other programs that don't receive title funds, so that they're not left out of this. We will be advocating for about $3 million to serve those programs. We also have an unallocated amount, which we'll be doing some community engagement around to help determine the best way to spend those dollars. They have certain percentages, 5% that is designed to help support, again, what the federal government calls learning loss. Another 1% for summer enrichment, another 1% for after-school programs, and then 3% is unallocated state choice on how to invest those dollars to support students. So we're in the beginning stages of this. There are a few more allowable uses with these funds, just that they've said that 20% of the district allocation, which is the vast majority, the $1 billion, needs to be spent again on what they term as learning loss. The remaining portion, 80% of those school district level funds, can be spent on the same allocations as ESSER 1 and ESSER 2. There are funds for private schools as well. These are called emergency assistance for non-public schools. We will have, I think, a little bit closer to $28 million in services or assistance to our private schools here in Oregon. It is earmarked specifically for private schools that enroll low income, again, their term, students, and or folks that are most impacted by the pandemic. So this is a really interesting place for Oregon. We have not typically provided funds directly to charter school, or excuse me, to private schools from the state level. And this is really a program that provides services or assistance, not direct funding. So it puts us in this sort of procurement place where we're procuring services for private schools in Oregon. So we're still working our way through that. The teams have done an amazing job of connecting with private schools and putting forward plans for those services. So just a little bit about our process moving forward. So again, we have these different percentages of the state set-asides that are required to be spent in certain areas. We will be processing this both with schools and community. We'll be looking to our partners in the school systems and in higher ed, to community through the various affinity advisory groups that we have here at the Oregon Department of Education, and through culturally specific organizations. We will do this most likely through some meetings and sharing ideas with one another. We'll make use of our equity decision tool within the agency, and we will review these decision points with Governor Brown, the Chief Financial Office, the Oregon Legislature, and through this process, also the Racial Justice Council, Education Recovery Committee. We are looking at some communication to help support our districts in making really strong decisions around how they use their funds. This is very much a draft, but we're trying to help them very much center equity in how they use these funds, that they focus on creating equitable access to education for all the students that are served in their community, that we focus on mental and social emotional health for students and staff, that we attend to unfinished learning. I'll talk about that more in just a minute. That we safeguard student opportunity. So we really think carefully about decisions that are being made based solely on the impacts of COVID-19, that might slow a student's progress through school. And we'll again talk a little bit about acceleration here in the next slide. We also want to ensure that we're serving students who are experiencing transition. So thinking about transition programs that help students transition into kindergarten, this year into kindergarten and first grade, because we'll have some students who never attended kindergarten inside a public school next fall. And so we want to support them. The same for our current 5th and 6th graders and our current 8th and 9th graders. We want to make extended learning a priority. So before and after school programs, summer learning programs, all of those are something that we want to focus in on. And for those students and families that choose to continue in a hybrid or a digital learning environment, we want to make sure that those programs are really strong and robust, and that students have an access to their full education through those programs. And then finally, thinking a lot about community engagement, and also across all of these efforts, and supporting our students after they leave high school with their next steps. Over here on the right, though, you do see this prioritizing health and safety for all communities. This is where all the funding, the allowable uses that have to do with PPE and air quality and ensuring that the building is set up to support students in a safe way. That's where each of those come in. So they sort of overlay all these others. We have worked really hard to shift this idea that our students have lost learning, this learning loss. We think that it is not a match to our students' experience over the last year. We think it ignores what they are coming to school with. We think it's a deficit frame. And so we are really trying to shift that language here in Oregon from learning loss to unfinished learning, where we are thinking about how do we meet students where they're at and actively build an understanding of that space and where we can move together going forward. We also have heard a lot of these terms, remediation and recovery, and we're trying to shift those to acceleration and renewal. We believe we can reimagine schools in a way that can transform learning for our students and teachers, even in a time like this, and perhaps even more importantly in a time like this. So we have a document that we put out that's a long form document that walks through each of these language shifts that we're hoping to put forward. And we even have a smaller or shorter sort of executive summary. And then students and teachers came forward and outdid all of us. So what I would like to do is share a 5-minute video from the students at North Salem High School who captured this sometimes in their home language as well. And so I'll share this video with you and then move on to a couple more topics.
Have today declared that the coronavirus presents a public health emergency in the United States.
After 23 years at North, working with students, I have to address the concerns that are being expressed by so many about the deficits the kids will demonstrate when they finally return to school.
It's concerning.
It's concerning.
It's concerning.
It's concerning that this is what concerns some in the face of a pandemic affecting millions around our country and world.
It speaks to one of my biggest fears.
It speaks to one of my biggest fears
For the children when they return.
In our determination to catch them up, I fear that we will lose who they are and what they have learned during this unprecedented time.
What on earth are we trying to catch them up on? The scope and sequence no longer apply.
The old assessments are no longer valid.
The plans have been interrupted.
We shouldn't forget that the scope and sequence, standards, and assessments were established by people, not ordained by God.
They simply do not apply.
They simply do not apply.
They simply do not apply.
When we return to school, we will return to new history.
Al regresar a la escuela, regresaremos con una nueva historia.
When we return to school, we will have returned with a new history.
And we will need to help them make sense of it.
When we return to school, we need you to listen to us.
Khi chúng mình trở lại trường học, mình cần bạn để nghe lắng để nghe mấy cái chỗ chuyện của mình để được giải.
Ike warawin ngeri sukun abu butet pokok sering ngeriken mut ngeriken ay papasanki tena. Let our stories be told.
Dejarnos contar nuestra historia.
Let our stories be told. We have endured, hemos superado.
We've endured.
Nosotros hemos tenido que superar. We have endured a year that has no parallel in our times.
There's no assessment that applies to who we are or what we have learned.
Our brains did not go into hibernation during this year. They may not have been focused on traditional school material, but they didn't stop either.
Our brains have been focused on where our next meal is coming from, or how to care for our younger siblings, or how to deal with the loss of a loved one.
We need you.
Necesitamos de ustedes.
We need you.
They need us.
They need us to welcome us back and help us write that history.
We need to surrender the artificial constructs and traditional notions of school as we knew it and greet students where they are, not where we think they should be.
Greet them with art supplies and writing materials.
And theater and dance and so many other opportunities to help them express what has happened in their lives during this horrific year.
Greet us with stories and books that will help us make sense of an upside down world. We missed you. They did not miss the test prep.
We didn't miss the worksheets.
Los extrañamos.
They didn't miss the homework.
We missed you.
Resist the pressure from whatever powers that be who are in a hurry to fix kids and make up for lost time. The time, it was not lost. It was invested in surviving an historic event in their lives, in our lives.
The children do not need to be fixed.
Nuestros hijos no necesitan reparación.
The children do not need to be fixed.
Nada nos ha destruido.
Nada nos ha destruido.
Nada nos ha destruido. Nada
nos ha destruido.
We are not broken.
They need to be heard.
Ellos necesitan ser escuchados.
They need to be heard.
Necesitamos escucharlos.
They need to be heard.
We need to be heard.
They need to be given as many tools as we can provide to nurture resilience and help them prepare and adjust for a post-pandemic world. Being a teacher is an essential connection between what is and what can be.
Our kids have so much to share about the world they live in, and we can help them make sense of what, for all of us, has been unimaginable.
Has been unimaginable.
Unimaginable. This will help them
And us achieve a lot more that can be measured
by any assessment ever devised.
Tenemos una tradición de permanecer unidos en tiempos difíciles, porque somos una comunidad resiliente y unida como familia, para la excelencia académica, pero aún más importante es nuestro compromiso de cuidarnos el uno al otro.
We have a tradition of coming together in times of need. Because our community is resilient, united as a Viking family in the excellence of not only our academics, but in our commitment to one another.
This is the true north.
Esta es la verdadera.
This is the true north.
This is the true north.
So thanks for letting me share that. that video. I just think that those students and those teachers and educators just did a great job of capturing the belief system that we're trying to put forward, the values that we're trying to put forward around what learning can look like in the future here in Oregon, starting with this summer. So our legislature did move into action, trying to support not just academic learning this summer, but really an opportunity for students to get together as peers and experience some enrichment. And so they created a number of programs that were funded by the Oregon legislature. The total amount adds up to about $250 million for summer activities and learning through a number of different programs. So I'm going to walk through those. These programs, again, are recognizing how immense and disruptive the impact of COVID-19 has been on Oregon kids, especially our students of color, our students who are members of tribes, our students experiencing disabilities, our migrant students, our emerging bilingual students, and our students navigating poverty, houselessness, and foster care. We've had some guiding principles as we've taken what's been created through this legislation at the department and are trying to put it out quickly to school districts and our charter school partners and our community partners so that they can provide this service to our children. I will say that at the same time, many districts and schools and community partners are coming together to try to build these programs. They're also highly fatigued, right? So our teachers and our community partners have been serving students and families nonstop through the pandemic. And while they welcome this new resource, at the same time, they're really struggling to be able to put these things into place for our children. In our effort, we are putting these funds out to school districts as required by the law, but where school districts may choose not to implement, we're also opening it up to the charter schools in those communities so that they can access the funds directly. We're trying to address any barriers that impact student participation in these summer enrichment programs. We're also focused in on the 3 areas of service that the legislature is trying to put forward. So one is about meeting the needs of high school students that are no longer on track to graduate, so overcoming credit loss. Providing enrichment programs, again, so that students can see one another and have some peer-to-peer experiences that are enriching. And then providing wraparound childcare so that families who are working can drop their younger children off at the beginning of the day and pick them up after work, and experiencing these enriching activities while also having childcare on both ends of that. This is all moving really quickly. We just yesterday released a best practices guide for summer learning and enrichment to the field. That included links to the unfinished learning document that I put forward, where we're trying to really shift that narrative. We've been doing partner feedback and engagement sessions this week. So we've met with the superintendents of all the school districts, the ESD reopening advisors, our charter school leaders. We have met with community partners through many of our advisory groups here at the Oregon Department of Education and the State Board of Ed Rules Advisory Committee that is really representative of communities across the state. So we're pulling all that feedback in so that we can put out guidance by the 23rd directly related to these grant activities, so that school districts and community partners can begin to access the funds. They will begin putting forward their applications the 26th through the 10th of May. We will be reporting back to the legislature on May 12th, and then we'll begin executing the grant agreements towards the second half of May, so that districts can have the startup funds to be able to put these together and have them ready as soon as school is released for the regular school year. Every district has allocations that are available to them. So this is not competitive, but they do have to meet the requirements of the grant to have access to the funds. There are 3 primary programs. There's summer academic learning for high school students. This is the credit recovery portion. There can be, with additional funds that they get through their federal funds and to ensure access to the credit recovery, they can also address mental and social emotional health in these programs. And they can add enriching activities and think of it as a very different approach to credit earning. The summer enrichment programs for kindergarten through 8th grade students is the second program. And then there's a third program of the wraparound childcare. Then there's a $40 million set aside specifically for the Oregon Community Foundation to grant out to community-based organizations. These can be culturally specific organizations, but they are organizations across the entire state so that they can directly provide services to students and families during this time. And this can be from early childhood on through the K-12 system. And you have the slides, so I'm not going to walk through the details of each of these programs, but I'm happy to take questions through the week. We also have, let me pull up here. Oh, I didn't put it in. We have a specific website that I'll drop in, and there's an email specific to questions about these programs. The last thing that I wanted to share, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Chair, and see if there are any questions, is that Oregon has a Boards and Commission Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee. They are working to recruit more diverse participation on state boards, commissions, councils across the state of Oregon. So across sectors, so not just education sector. They are, as part of that effort, they're going to be holding some information sessions for people in the state who may be interested in learning more about serving on one of our many boards or commissions or councils. And they would like to, they're reaching out to current board members across the state to see if they would be willing to step into any of these sessions and speak to the benefits and need for diversity on our public boards here in Oregon. So there are 3 sessions available there at the times there. If you have an interest, you could send me an email, and then I will connect you with our representative through this process is Tony Roselius, who's the executive director at the Teacher Standards and Practices Commission. And so we'll connect you with them, and then you can participate. With that, I'll stop and turn it back over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Gill. And do we have any questions? Jennifer, yeah, Director Skurlock.
Hi, thank you so much, Vice Chair, and thank you so much, Cole, for the detailed presentation. I do have a question about so high school, I understand, will be probably credit recovery. I'm so glad there's mental health supports that will be added in to really support our students that are struggling. I wasn't sure what the middle school program would entail. I was just kind of curious about that particular piece.
Yeah, so kindergarten through 8th grade is it's the summer enrichment program. So it's can be inclusive of, so it's created by each community, right? So it will look a little different across the state, but the state funds can pay for enrichment activities that can be, anything from outdoor school experiences to dance and music and other kinds of arts, to physical education or martial arts, those kinds of things, or field trips to different organizations. Can also include academic learning or bridge programs to get ready for the next grade level or the next school that they're going to, and then also can include mental and social emotional health, things like counseling circles through the summer, can even be family inclusive, so there can be programs that include parents, siblings, and students.
All right, so thank you for explaining that. I was curious about, and I appreciate the terms being changed from learning loss to unfinished learning. I'm curious, my concern has to do with the transition of kiddos who maybe are struggling academically at the middle school level and then transitioning to high school level where we're counting credits. And so I just wanted to see maybe what's being included to make sure that those who are maybe have unfinished learning, that they're able to successfully and feel good about their transition to high school as they embark on, in different classes to prepare them to graduate from high school. So I was wondering, I guess, how are students then identified so that they can receive the supports that they need to feel confident and successful as they transition to high school academics?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the legislation does not call that out specifically. Through our guidance, we are asking for a focus on what we're calling transition grade levels. So for us, it's kindergarten for sure this year, because not all kindergarten students participate in public school. It's kindergarten and first grade. So those transitioning into elementary school, those transitioning into middle school, and then our 8th to 9th grade, those transitioning into high school. So we're asking districts to pay particular attention or focus on the needs of students at those grade levels to help prepare them for that transition. So that can be academic support like you're talking about, but can also be, in those places where you're just transitioning into middle school, even the fear of, can I open my locker and get my things in and out in the time period allowed? So kind of that situational awareness and making sure that they're ready for that context. At high school, a lot of it does have to do with what a failure means now on your pathway to graduation, and what earning credits means, and understanding all those aspects. And those can be also tied with schools that they have different terms for these, but link programs or web programs that have that peer-to-peer model to help support incoming 9th graders with older students in the school that can help them experience that and be prepared for high school. So all of those are allowed. They aren't emphasized in the law, but the ODE guidance is emphasizing those transition and bridge programs to support students.
Any other questions for Director Gill? Oh, yes, Monica.
I haven't had a chance to read your letter on switching over to, or breaking up the ODE with the Department of Early Learning and Care. I was wondering if you could just highlight a few points as to what that would change in the system as it stands now, and what the hopes are for that in the future.
Yeah, so the idea behind this is that there's an entire agency that's focused on our youngest children and their families and how to best support them. So it covers everything from childcare, employment-related childcare that is currently housed at the Oregon Department of Human Services, to the childcare programs that are overseen through licensing at the Early Learning Division currently, through about 4 different preschool kinds of and early learning kinds of programs that the Early Learning Division oversees, and making sure that all of those are completely aligned, and with programs that the Oregon Department of Ed currently runs too, to make sure that we're aligned in our care for our youngest children who experience disability, and making sure that they can be provided with services in their preschool and early learning programs that they attend right now. And so those are the idea behind it, is that we would actually see in the legislation as it's designed right now, and it's still going through process, we would actually see closer ties between the State Board of Education and the Early Learning Council that are built into the law, so that we're informing one another's work. So as we consider standards for kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade academic standards and other kinds of social emotional learning standards, that we're connecting with the Early Learning Council. And as they're considering standards for preschool, they're connecting with the State Board of Education. So there's actually more built-in access points to one another in this bill than currently exist in practice. And so we think that this is a pretty good model for moving forward. It does allow that as an standalone agency to attract other kinds of funding to support children and families in Oregon. There will be a lot to work out over the next 2 to 3 years if the bill passes. It doesn't take effect immediately. There are what it does is it calls for certain studies and engagement to happen across both K-12 and early learning partners, and most importantly, families, to come back to the legislature in September and give guidance on which things should belong in which agency, which program should belong in which agency. And then there are a number of fiscal studies to determine where staffing comes from and where funding comes from to support the agency. The Early Learning Division as a part of the Oregon Department of Education is also rather new, so it's only existed a few years. And in those few years, it has been the fastest growing part of the Oregon Department of Education. So there are several hundred staff members in the Early Learning Division. And we really have come to this size that it makes sense to separate and fully tie the authorities and responsibilities and accountability that is now mixed across the two agencies to separate those, and so they exist for each organization. That's the thinking behind it, and we'll continue to follow it as it moves through the process.
Thank you so much for that explanation. And I really do appreciate the consideration of that individual population with their special needs and interests. And it sounds like a promising plan. Thank you.
Thanks.
I think there was one last question. I didn't see Superintendent Sipes' hand up, and she just muted her screen. So now I don't know if she's available. Oh, there she is. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm still here. And I was just going to comment about the summer school piece, and we've kind of transitioned past that, but just a quick note to say thank you to the department. The guidance that they put together in a very quick amount of time really does maximize the flexibility for districts to do wonderful things for kids this summer, while also giving some great ideas as well. So just huge kudos to them.
Thank you, Heidi. And from a district that does a lot of summer and extended programming for kids, that's great. So I'm hopeful it matches your needs.
Wonderful information. Thank you, Director Gill. I really appreciate all of the content and explanation. And I think we are trying to do a little bit of crunching on time. We're a little behind. Sorry, is that me? Was that me? Did I cause that? the chairing? Corey, tell me no, please. Okay, we're going to move right on to the written comments. And as has been our practice since shifting to virtual meetings, the board is accepting public comment via email. Comments received before this meeting have been made available to the members and have been posted to Board Book. So thank you for sending us those public comments. As Director Colonna mentioned, we appreciate and read them thoroughly. We'll go ahead and move on to the consent agenda. This is our practice for virtual meetings. I will call for a motion and a second. Second, Vice Chair Wheeler will make the motion, and it will be seconded by Director Colonna. And then Corey will do a roll call for those. So there are 2 items on the consent agenda. And can I get a motion for the items on the consent agenda?
I move the items on the consent agenda.
And I second the items on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Second, Vice Chair Wheeler and Director Colonna. We have a first and a second, and to move the items on the consent agenda. All those in favor of moving the consent agenda say aye. All those opposed say no, and Corey will do a roll call.
Director Skurlock,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Colonna,
Aye.
Second Vice Chair Wheeler,
Aye.
Vice Chair Martinez Zapata.
Aye. Okay, so moved. The motion passes. We will now transition to adoptions. Our first item on the adoptions agenda is the American Indian Alaska Native Student Success Plan funding indirect rates. And we have both April and Ramona present if there are any questions. And it looks like we don't have any questions. Can I get a motion?
I move adoption of American Indian Alaska Native Student Success Plan Rules, OAR 581-017-0687.
And I second the motion.
Thank you for that first and second. We have a second to adopt the American Indian Alaska Native Student Success Plan Rules, OAR 581-017, -0687. All those in favor say aye, and all those opposed say no. And Corey will do a roll call.
Director Skurlock,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Colonna,
Aye.
Second Vice Chair Wheeler,
Aye.
Vice Chair Martinez Zapata.
Aye. And the motion passes. Our second item on the agenda is the LGBTQ 2SIA plus Student Success Plan. And we also have Cindy Hunt and Jessica Ventura here for any questions, if anybody has any questions or comments. And I do have a comment that Student Director Jocelyn Arenas wanted me to share with you since she was not able to stay for the entire meeting. So I'm going to read that comment for her on this item. Every student deserves a place to be safe, to call home, to find support, and to feel loved. These past few years have been extremely heartbreaking, having friends and family members telling me the difficulties of coming out and being able to just be themselves. These same students are struggling with mental health and have no one to talk to. They fear being judged from teachers and students alike. Many of these students have faced sexual assault as well and are too scared to talk to anyone about it. Many people feel like just because they are in the LGBTQ SIA plus, they don't experience sexual assault, but they do. Lastly, I would like to share a concern of one of my fellow peers. They had informed me that they were terrified of going out into the real world, not knowing how to be in a relationship and take care of themselves. Health classes tend to solely focus on heterosexual relationships, and we all are aware that there are so many more different forms of relationships. Every student needs to be valued. If there are no other comments or questions for Cindy or Jessica, and Corey, can you help me if I missed any hands?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Oh, one from Director Skurlock.
Yes, Director Skurlock, thank you.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair. I do have a question in the docket where it says LGBTQ2 SIA plus advisory group meetings. I just wanted to hear just a little bit more information about how that process is going to work to include, to have advisory, to have student voice included in conversations, what that will look like. Thank you.
Yeah, Vice Chair Martinez Zapata and Board Member Skurlock. Thank you for that question. And I actually appreciate the question a lot because Senate Bill 52, which will codify the LGBTQ2SIA plus plan, one of the amendments that was submitted on the Senate side was to add a student advisor to the group. So once the bill makes it out of the Ways and Means process and is hopefully signed by the governor, we will then bring back sort of the original advisory group that we created for the plan. And also then see who's missing, who can we bring to the table, and that'll also include students. I would also add that, you know, if we do get this other bill passed that would create the Racial Justice Council's Student Council, that will be another opportunity that we have at the department to put all of our policies and rules in front of student groups. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities in the future, and also we have always amazing student board advisors that we're trying to figure out how to get them more involved in those policy advisory groups. So always happy to think through and strategize with you all. And I don't know if Colt, did you want to say anything else on that?
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. So just one more addition to that. I agree with everything Jessica said, but just so you're aware, Director Skurlock, that when we created the plan, you know, it was created by community. A part of the community was outreach to students across Oregon. So we contracted with actually an LGBTQ-owned consulting firm, and they held listening sessions with LGBTQ students and advocates in different communities across the state, coastal communities, Eastern Oregon communities, and communities up and down I-5 to ensure that student voice was collected for the development of the plan initially. So all of that information was brought back to the current advisory group that created that plan. So we will do efforts like that as well. So it's not just a few students that are representing thousands, but going directly to communities and holding forums with students as well.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, can I get a motion for the LGBTQ2 SIA plus Student Success Plan?
I move adoption of the LGBTQ2 SIA plus Student Success Plan.
And I second the motion.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to adopt the LGBTQ2 SIA plus Student Success Plan. All those in favor will say aye, and those opposed no, and Corey will do the roll call.
Director Skurlock?
Aye.
Director Russell?
Aye.
Director Colonna?
Aye.
Second Vice Chair Wheeler?
Aye.
Vice Chair Martinez Zapata?
Aye. Thank you all. Okay, and now we will move on. Motion passes. I think I forgot that part. Thank you so much. And we will now move to the first readings. And the first item on the agenda is the charter school waiver request for Four Rivers Community School. And we have Kate Pattison and Shell Robbins here to do a presentation.
Fantastic, thank you. Good morning, Vice Chair Martinez Zapata, Director Gill, members of the board. My name is Kate Pattison and I'm the Charter School Specialist at the department. Today we are going to discuss public charter school waiver requests. Over the years, we have discussed many charter school waiver requests, and the department has developed a stronger process to support the board in getting information necessary to make these difficult decisions. Before we look at each request, I'd like to provide a little bit of background. First, public charter schools are public schools. They are semi-autonomous schools that are authorized through a contractual relationship with a sponsoring board. These public schools are regulated by statute in Chapter 338 and Division 26 rules adopted by the state board. Public charter schools are granted some flexibility because not all laws apply to them. The legislative intent was to foster innovation and allow new types of school opportunities for students in the state. Within the charter school statutes, the State Board of Education was given the authority to grant additional flexibilities for public charter schools within ORS 338. The statute states, upon application by a public charter school, the State Board of Education may grant a waiver of any provision in this chapter. It goes on to include some of the criteria that the State Board must consider. It must promote the development of programs by providers, enhance the equitable access by underserved families to the public education of their choice, extend equitable access to public support by all students, and permit high-quality programs of unusual cost. Over the last 20 years, the State Board has considered 111 charter school waiver requests. Beginning in 2014, the State Board started to engage with the waiver criteria I just mentioned with more critical eyes toward equity. We updated the process and embedded equity questions for charter schools to address. The process now includes required participation in an informational meeting, an internal review and feedback from department staff, and the opportunity for the charter school to revise and clarify their request. In 2019, the department used this new process for 6 waiver requests. All of these requests centered on admission process and giving priority enrollment to children of staff. The board denied all 6 of these requests. In 2020, the department continued with the process and evaluated 3 requests regarding weighted lotteries and priority enrollment for children of staff, and the board approved all 3. This year, we have 2 requests. One is from your own State Board sponsored charter school, Four Rivers Community School. The school is requesting a waiver of the lottery statute to allow the school to operate a weighted lottery, giving additional weights to students who speak a native language other than English, and to students who are enrolled in the Head Start program. The second waiver is from Lamond French Immersion Public Charter School, sponsored by PPS in Portland. Their waiver request relates to teacher qualifications and would waive the requirement for the school to have at least 50% of the teaching and administrative FTE be licensed by TSPC. We've invited charter school leaders representing these schools to present today and answer your questions, and they'll provide additional information with me between now and the next meeting based on the questions that you have. So first, we have Four Rivers Community School. The school opened in 2003 and serves about 350 students grades K through 12 in a dual language immersion early college model. This waiver request is to conduct a weighted lottery that will give priority admission to students who speak a native language other than English and students who are enrolled in the Head Start program. I do want to provide a little bit of information on weighted lotteries. In 2015, the legislature approved Senate Bill 820 that allowed charter schools to conduct weighted lotteries. The law said, for the purpose of ameliorating the impact of discrimination against historically underserved students, a public charter school may select students through a weighted lottery that favors historically underserved students. And used in this paragraph, historically underserved students are at risk because of any combination of 2 or more factors, including their race, ethnicity, English language proficiency, socioeconomic status, gender, sexual orientation, disability, and geographic location. This law included a sunset and it ended in 2019. Four Rivers implemented a weighted lottery in the past and is now requesting to continue the practice, but with refined criteria. It is important to acknowledge that weighted lotteries can be tricky. Depending on how it is implemented, it is possible that the weighted lottery itself may result in discriminatory practices. The department has discussed this with DOJ and wants the board to know that approving these waivers does not, Approving these waiver requests does not endorse or encourage the use of weighted lotteries that are discriminatory. Additionally, the department encourages each charter school using a weighted lottery to thoroughly vet their process with their own legal counsel to mitigate any unintended outcomes and legal risk. So with that, I would like to now introduce the superintendent of Four Rivers Community School, who is here to answer any questions.
Thanks, Kate. Good morning, Vice Chair Martina Zapata, Director Gill, members of the board. My name is Shell Robbins, and I'm the superintendent of Four Rivers Community School in Ontario. I want to thank you for taking the time to understand the importance of this waiver request. and appreciate the opportunity to express the need for a weighted lottery in our dual language program. As Kate said, we've used a weighted lottery in previous years as allowed by ORS 338.125 through Senate Bill 820, but that opportunity has since sunsetted. To continue providing equitable access to our program, we use many tools that include Head Start partnerships, outreach through our current family ambassadors, Spanish radio ads, strategic placement of enrollment information, and most recently, we're really excited about this, have a new partnership with Spanish-speaking childcare providers in our area. That's an area we hadn't tapped into before, and through a conversation with ESD partners had just learned about that. So I think there was a Zoom intro today on that. So although we have a comprehensive outreach plan for enrollment, the weighted lottery provides the best opportunity for equitable student access to our dual language program. So thank you for your time, and I'm available to answer any questions or bring additional information back to you at the next meeting, if that's what you would wish. Thank you.
Do we have any questions or comments for either Kate or Shell? Okay, I don't see any hands going up. And then if we can also hear from on this next item, the charter school waiver, which I think Kate has already spoken on for Le Monde French Immersion School, from Shuka Rezvani. Please correct me if I totally mispronounced your name. So you're on mute. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Martinez Zapata, Director Gill, and all of the board members. My name is Shuka Rezvani, so you pronounced it exactly right. And I'm the principal at Le Monde French Immersion Public Charter School. We are applying today for a waiver of the requirement that half of our administrative and teaching staff be licensed by TSPC. We would, as opposed to being charter registered. We would like to increase that to allowing all of our staff to be charter registered. And the reason is because of our very unique circumstances of being a French immersion public charter school. Most of our instruction, varying from 100% to 80% of our instruction, happens entirely in the French language. And so finding qualified staffing already poses a lot of challenges for us. We already have an overlay of having a difficulty getting visas for many of the people who would be teaching for us. And then to additionally have this requirement, especially when the licensure requirements in other countries vary from what's required in the US, such that the requirements become more onerous when we're trying to meet the US standards, in addition to already having to try to meet. The requirements are actually often higher in other countries. And so for them to reach those higher standards to get reciprocity under TSPC poses additional challenges for us. We're a relatively, we feel like we're a very high achieving academically school in terms of the state testing. We've always historically performed very well. I think we're number 6 in the state in most of the state assessments, and often perform among the first in the Portland Public School District. We do care a lot about teacher credentials and teacher qualifications, but in our program, we're not seeing a direct link between licensure and student success. So for us, we feel we're in a very unique situation of requesting a waiver. So that's all I wanted to say, and I'm happy to answer any questions as well or bring any more additional information back.
Thank you, Shuka. Any questions? Jerry has his hand up, and then George.
Corey or Kate, are we able to screen share the document that Tara O'Neill sent? At my end, I'm able to look at the screen and see people, but I don't know how to also put a document up at the same time. And I was wondering if we might be able to take a look at that as we make our discussions. And if not, that's okay. I think I can talk my way through it.
I think I have it coming up for you now.
Okay, so this is a fascinating waiver request for me. I see definitely two sides to it. This is certainly an outstanding school in terms of achievement. It fills a very innovative need. Its history is excellent, and I like the idea of innovation moving forward and different ways of doing things. I guess if there's one of the main things we've learned through the entire pandemic is that we need to be flexible. We need to be able to look at different routes, and we need to go different directions. And with that said, I also have a great feeling for what districts say to us as board members. So Tara O'Neill is in charge of this program for the Portland School District. And it seems to me that she also has a strong feeling about the success of the program as well. And she understands the issues. It seems as though she's trying to meet the request at least part way. And that is that 35% of the staff would need to be licensed through TSPC, but the rest of them would be on a TSPC charter credential. I'm not saying that exactly right. That's not exactly what the words are. But if approximately 2/3 of the staff did not have to be licensed through the regular Oregon licensure requirement, it seems as though that's pretty reasonable. And I feel as though that's what Tara O'Neill is saying here. So I'm on the fence of looking at the historical perspective and the needs of the school. And I also feel when there is a person in a school district heading up a program like this, a full-time FTE, that they have to be considered as well. So I just would appreciate, I think at this point, any other board members' perspectives, and I know George is in the line to give his thoughts, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say, George. Thank you very much.
George, yes, please.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I do have a couple of questions. The first one relates to language immersion schools within school districts. I know that there are school districts that have French immersion schools, Chinese immersion schools, other language immersion schools that fall within the purview of TSPC. And I'm just wondering if we could get information on how those schools manage with the same challenge. I know, for example, that if you look at the Eugene School District, the French immersion school fits all the same kind of characteristics that you've spoken about, that traditionally and for decades have been the highest achieving school within the district, and has faced challenges and has had to recruit teachers from outside of the United States to teach within the French language. And I'm wondering how they manage within the TSPC rules to do that. That's my first question. And then the second one is, when we get requests about waiving the TSPC requirements, do we ever get a response from or information from TSPC about how they feel about that. So those are my two questions.
Vice Chair Martinez Zapata, Director Russell, I can address the second piece a little bit. This is actually kind of the first time the state board has considered a waiver request like this. One other time you've had Paisley Charter School, that is a single school district that operates as a virtual charter school with both its statewide virtual and its brick and mortar boarding school, very small in Paisley, Oregon. They asked, the virtual charter school rules say that you have to have 95% of your staff licensed. They don't get the flexibility of having as much of their staff registered. So they asked that their brick and mortar could have the 50% registered teachers to serve their rural area and doing teacher recruitment. And the board did approve that. So this is really the first time. So if that's something that you're interested in, the department could reach out to TSPC and ask for input. I'm curious, like, what kind of input you'd want to hear from TSPC.
George, do you have a follow-up to the question?
Yeah, I'm just interested in their reaction because I'm sure they get requests all the time to waive requirements for licensing on a number of issues. Although I do know that since I've retired, they've changed the TSPC licensing requirements and so forth. But, you know, if I was sitting on the TSPC board, and I think there's some people on this board who may have done that, I just would be curious as to where this heads in terms of licensing kinds of things.
I too am curious about that same question, and I'll have another maybe follow-up question, but Colt's hand is up right now. So,
thank you, Chair. So I agree with Director Russell that we reach out to the commission just to get their thinking on anything related to licensure and what this means for the state or for the students in the system. From their perspective, I think that would be helpful. And two things I just want to encourage the board. Partly, you know, Kate called this out. This isn't a request that we've had before. It holds possibility to become precedent setting in a way. So as you think about how you will respond to this, my hope is that if you choose to move forward to support this request, that you place some really clear guidelines and parameters around it that sort of name the board's values in making this decision and the reasons why this one would be accepted, so that as you and future boards face future requests, there's something on record for us to look back at and understand the thinking behind this decision. And as part of that, I would request that if you do approve this, that you do make it really clear that the remaining teachers, which I believe would be required, but because we're going away from the 50-50 statute, what's in statute, that the remaining teachers at least be registered through TSPC and not if not licensed. So.
Yes, Shuka, I think you have.
I was just going to respond to Director Russell. I think that those were really good questions that he asked, and I wanted to see if I could try to answer part of the first one. You had asked about the fact that what are some of the other public schools, including the one French immersion public school in Eugene, you know, how are they addressing the same issue? And I think that that's one of our additional problems, is that as a charter school that does receive less of the per pupil funding as compared with a regular district school, all of our salaries are proportionally also reduced as compared with them. So we're trying to compete as a public school, as a public charter school, with both the folks who are applying to the one other public school that's a French immersion school, as well as the private schools for getting teachers, and they're able to pay more because they have more funding than we do. So that's another area of challenge for us, in addition to the overlay of visas, is just that as a school and as an institution, we tend to pay lower salaries than the district schools.
Thank you, Shuka. Did you have something else, George? I saw you trying to raise your hand, I think.
I did, and this goes back to actually Shell and the application from Four Rivers. Just and Jerry brought this to my mind. There is a letter from the school district PPS with respect to the request from the French immersion, but there is no letter from I guess I don't know who it would be, Ontario or the school district, either supporting or standing up for the request for Four Rivers.
I'd be happy to address that. Vice Chair Martinez Zapata, Director Russell, Four Rivers Community Charter School is sponsored by the State Board of Education, and therefore wouldn't necessarily have a letter from its own board because it's presenting and requesting of its own board, sponsoring board. We have notified the school district of this request, and so they have access to the board book and materials. And if wanted to provide comment, they're invited to.
Just so would the department be the one to say whether or not they think it's a good idea?
Cole?
Thank you. So if the board desires a recommendation from the department, we can do that. We have not done that on charter school waiver requests in the past because they really are the purview of the State Board of Education, whether to grant these or not. So the past practice has been that we don't come in with a recommendation for you, that you weigh it out. And I believe that and Kate, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was a request set by a previous state board, or that we don't have recommendations on these. But I'm not positive, so.
I would like to just offer for both of these and for all waiver requests that we've had since we started this new process, any waiver that is approved by the state board, the charter school has put forth how they will collect data and be prepared to report back to the board. We do limit waiver requests based on board direction to the length of their current charter contract. So the expectation is if the charter school would ever come back and ask for another waiver request, they would have to report on the actual impact of this waiver request. So I know that there are questions around, we intend to do this, but what does it actually look like? And how will that actually play out for the charter school in the community? And so charter schools are prepared to report back to the board and tell you how it's going.
Superintendent Sipe has her hand up.
Thank you. I realize that I put the information in the chat, but I should probably share it here as well. I did serve on the TSPC Commission for 7 years and chaired it for a number of years. And there were frequently questions regarding the charter school registry and the difference just in the requirements between who can teach in a charter school and who can teach in a public school, and quite a few concerns over those 7 years about those differences and the potential impact on students. And so I would just ask that you do consider talking to TSPC about that, because the challenges being discussed, I share as a public school superintendent with a dual language program for my elementary students. And so the very same challenges in securing bilingual teachers who are fully qualified to teach our students in both languages exist in public schools as well. And none of these schools have the opportunity to either have the registry option to find bilingual staff, nor the option to have fewer certified staff. And so I really think there could be some equity issues looking across our state if this type of situation is allowed.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments, Superintendent Sipe. And Director Skurlock has her hand up as well.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you for the presentation, Shuka and Kate. I too have the same concerns, and I would like to hear input from TSPC for the record. And I did add these things to the chat. In addition, I'm concerned with intent versus impact. and the precedent this will create. And so when that was referenced with Superintendent Colt Gill, I was in agreement with that, and that just confirmed some of the things that I had been thinking about. So I really appreciate the presentation, appreciate the information. I would just like to have more input, more information before I make a decision. Thank you so much.
And Teacher Representative Bergman also has her hand up.
Hi, thank you for presenting today, Shuka and Kate. In looking at the proposal there, it states that you've taken data on, or that there has not been any performance differentiation in the students under teachers who are licensed or not licensed under TSPC. And I'd just like to know a little bit more information specifically on the details that you looked at for that, what those performance indicators are, what data has been gathered for that specifically, and also if there's been any whole student sort of response or report that could support those findings.
So, I mean, the data that we're relying on is mostly based on MAP data in reading and math, which again, it's looking at, you know, one aspect, the academic growth that we're seeing in the students. It's not looking at obviously necessarily how they're addressing their social emotional needs or other elements of what it takes to be a good teacher. And so looking at the MAP data, you know, we often are seeing, frankly, with some of our charter registered teachers, better results in terms of academic growth in the students that they work with. And I think that that's in part just because of the specific mix of teachers that we happen to have. I don't know that it's related necessarily to their licensure versus their registry status.
I think Shuka might have cut off. If we'll see if she returns from cyberspace someplace. I don't know that I see any other hands up. Or Kate, yes, thank you.
Oh, I saw Jerry, maybe
Jerry. Jerry, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I wanted to emphasize Director Gill's information to us about this could be a very precedent-setting decision. We've had lots of waivers come through before that we've discussed, and we've spent quite a bit of time on it. I'm not sure that there's one as important if this becomes precedent-setting as this one. And having said that, I also want to thank Shuka and Kate. I mentioned this earlier in my comments this morning on how well they've presented this to us. Yes, it's true, we're asking for more information and we're going to get more information. But I always want to call out that extra effort that goes into giving us background data. And this one is particularly well done on all sides of the issue. So thank you very much for that. And again, I want to emphasize what Director Gill said about the importance of this decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Colonna. Director Russell, your hand is up, but I'm not sure if that's from the previous comment or not.
That's from the previous comment.
Okay,
thanks.
Thank you.
I'm not sure I know how to take it down.
I think you click on it again. I also wanted to weigh in a little. I have a question and also wanted to weigh in on something that has already been shared by some of my peers on here. The question that I have is, if it's not TSPC licensure that these folks might have, what type of credentialing do they have?
I can address that, Vice Chair Martinez Zapata. The TSPC rules and statute require that anybody who is working as a teacher or administrator in a public charter school who isn't licensed must also have the charter registry. And that includes the fingerprinting, background check, passing the civil rights basic test, and then submitting a letter from the school. Specifically, it's kind of like a co-application, so that this person who is registered is specifically teaching at a particular charter school. It lasts for 3 years. The charter school has to state requirements for the person, what the requirements are, minimum qualifications for the person to be a teacher at the charter school. TSPC also requests a copy of transcripts. And so typically you see this person having a minimum bachelor's degree and then whatever else the charter school is requiring on top of that. TSPC will only deny a charter registry if it's an incomplete application or they don't pass the background check. So if the charter school has signed off and the background check is passed, then this person will likely be able to be employed at the charter school.
Thank you very much for that information. And so the follow-up question that I have that also I think Superintendent Sipe brought up is the issue of equity and or inequity that this might create for districts who are trying to hire other types of bilingual educators and don't have the flex that we are now approving for this particular charter school. How would we, can TSPC address that as well, or how might we address anything that could be that type of a reverberating effect?
I am taking notes on what to talk to TSPC about, and I will be looking for a more in-depth conversation with them. We might even invite them back to the next meeting, depending on what it looks like, if it's something they can clearly put in a letter versus maybe having a longer conversation. So we might do something like that. I would just say, from my experience now in this realm in Oregon with charter schools, there are a number of districts that have leveraged the charter school flexibility and created their own charter school to get access to the flexibilities that were established by the legislature for schools and families and teachers in Oregon through the charter school pathway. So it's not unique to just community-driven charter schools. There are districts that choose to start a charter school for that express reason, especially around teacher qualifications. We see that happening a lot in rural communities.
Thank you, Kate. Any other, Director Skurlock, I knew I saw another hand. Yes, please.
Thank you so much. I see my hand and then Heidi Sipe, but I know it's a little hard to see. Thank you so much for your patience with that. I do have a question about, so a Bachelor of Arts is a minimum requirement to teach. Okay, and then I was wondering, so TSPC has assessments that teachers have to take in order to get the licensing, and I was curious if that is not required. So they're not required. The standardized tests like Praxis or Aurea are not required for the teachers teaching at the French immersion, or is that just for the waiver, the teachers who are receiving the waiver?
I can somewhat address that. And then our two school leaders have more practical experience with this, so they might be able to speak to it. But specifically around the content knowledge and endorsements, or however you would want to talk about that, when you're talking about charter registry, that's not necessarily a piece to charter registry. The school is setting the minimum qualifications on what that teacher must have to show that they are qualified to teach a specific content area. And so a lot of charter schools, like in language immersion, are looking for out of country, a different country's teacher licensure program or teacher preparation program. So a lot of the schools say that's a minimum, or an advanced degree in that particular language or content area, or a specific amount of career experience in that area. So most staff who are hired by public charter schools looking at registered teachers are not looking for the minimum qualifications by law. They're saying that's how you would get registered, and this is what we think you are required to do or have it in terms of experience and knowledge to teach in our school. So that is one of the things that I think is a reasonable ask for the French immersion school for Lamont to bring back is, what does your teacher position description and qualifications look like? And that is something that we can build into the package so that the school can't, has to have a minimum qualifications for what those teachers look like. So there's different ways that could be approached.
Thank you, Kate. I would really appreciate that, having the information there so that I could reference that. Thank you so much.
But I do want to make clear too that registered teachers are not required to take the content exams that are required for licensure. I believe that they do have to take the US and Oregon civil rights exam that TSPC has all teachers take.
And Superintendent Sipe has her hand up.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, you're right. My hand is kind of light there. I'm sorry about that. So the question regarding the certification process in a traditional school or a non-charter school, I don't want to say traditional, but in a non-charter school, people can also receive what's considered a restricted license with just a bachelor's degree. But those individuals have to enter into a master's program right away and have to show progress towards their master's, and must obtain that master's within 3 years. And then once they are fully licensed with that master's in teaching, then they have to obtain certification requirements beyond that, meaning professional development each year. In a charter school registry, the person can have a bachelor's in any content area. It just needs to be a bachelor's degree. There is no content test. There is the civil rights test. There are no continuing education requirements and no master's requirements. So for, again, going back to that equity piece, I lose a lot of teachers every year that we can get in, we can get their foot in the door, but they look at the cost and the benefit between getting their master's degree and becoming a teacher and getting their master's degree and going elsewhere in the world, and it doesn't necessarily pencil out. And so that's a continued challenge.
I fully agree. There's a much greater direct path to instruction versus having to have the district create a charter school. And so I think there is definitely that equity piece to consider here for instruction for teachers. And I don't see any other hands up. Do we have any comments? Or Kate, yes.
I just wanted to acknowledge that these are before you for first read. We will bring them back at the next meeting in May. I've taken notes on some of your questions, and so I hope to bring back the information for this discussion to continue. And at that time, you'll be able to make a decision or give us more direction from there. Thank you for having us here today.
Thank you all for presenting. And I want to echo Director Colonna's comments. The presentation materials were fantastic. It was great content and detail. Okay, so before we break for lunch, I want to let everybody know that we have a quick update to our afternoon agenda. We will be shifting the Paisley School District's Division 22 waiver request to the May meeting. We appreciate Paisley's understanding and are looking forward to hearing their request next month. Our agenda will be updated accordingly, and afternoon topics will be heard about 15 minutes earlier, although we're a little behind. So I think we're still good on time. And so that's just a shift to the agenda. And if there are no other questions or comments before we break for lunch, I think we will take a full hour and be back at 1:20. And welcome back, everyone. We will continue with the first readings where we left off before lunch. Just a reminder that we have moved one of the items to the next month's meeting. So next on the first readings is the OSCIM program schedule change. And we have Michael Elliott and Rick Krager here, I hope.
Good afternoon, Chair. This is Michael Elliott for the OSCIM, also known as the Awesome Program. Unfortunately, Rick Krager cannot attend today. He has an important meeting on the Summer Learning Program, and he extends his apologies for not being able to attend. But I am ready to present if the board is ready.
Yes, please go ahead, Michael.
Thank you. I bring before the board today a rule change, first read rule change of what I hope is a very straightforward rule. 4 years ago, the Awesome Program changed their application deadlines from 5 months ahead of the elections to 9 months ahead of the elections. And we are switching back to going back to 5 months ahead of the elections. And I want to give some background of why that happened. So the Awesome Program is the Oregon School Capital Improvement Matching Program. And this program is there to provide incentives to districts to pass local general obligation bonds. In 2013, there was a big study done, and it was found out that a lot of districts were just missing passing a bond by a few votes, a few percentage points. And the state determined that an incentive or an investment by the state would help get a lot of those districts over the edge and into a passed bond. So that's what created the Awesome Program. Well, to provide an incentive, it helps that the voters know ahead of time that they have a commitment from the state should they pass the bond. So we've always had the application process months ahead of the actual election. This gives the districts time to inform their voters and make it aware that, hey, we've got a commitment from the state. If you pass this bond, we get an additional amount of money. The additional amounts of money are $4 million for most districts, and the bigger districts will get up to $8 million. So for a lot of districts, this is a significant sum of money for them, sometimes doubling their the amount of money they have to do school improvements, sometimes adding a significant percentage. The first 2 years of the program, we had a 5-month window, but what we were finding was a lot of districts were going out that weren't really ready to go out. They hadn't done the hard work of community engagement, talking to all of their community members to figure out what bond package would work best and show them the needs of the school district and the school facilities. So they were still failing, and the Awesome Program wasn't helping. And honestly, because they weren't really ready to go out, they were sometimes taking a spot of those districts that really were ready to go out. So to try to address this, we moved the application process out 9 months. And this required then districts to be skipping an election every other election. So if they applied in November, they couldn't go for the May election. They'd have to wait till the next November election. And we saw the problem reduce, but not necessarily because of this change in the from 5 months to 9 months. What really reduced the number of districts that were going out that weren't really ready to go out was the requirement that the districts provide a long-range facility plan and a facility assessment. These documents require the district to engage in community involvement, do some hard work, look at their buildings, really try to determine what the level of deferred maintenance is. And it's those documents and that process that really help a district build a bond campaign. And so the requirement of those documents really reduced the number of districts that were kind of going out and not really being ready to go. So it wasn't necessarily the 9 months. The other problem we've noticed is the 9 month causes confusion among districts, and it doesn't provide the flexibility we want to provide for districts, especially smaller districts. Sometimes 9 months out, they think they're ready, but they're not sure. Then they get some information that says they're not really ready to go. They should wait, but it's too late. Now they're stuck. And it's been a real challenge for districts, especially smaller districts, to really try to find that sweet spot for when they go for a bond election. For those of you who haven't been through a bond election, I find it's 50% science and 75% art, because you've got all the numbers you crunch, you know your numbers in terms of how much building and deferred maintenance you have, but then it's where's the community with this? Where are they ready to go out for an election? When will they be receptive to this? And that's the art. And we're finding that the 9 months doesn't provide the flexibility that districts need. So we're asking the state board to approve a rule to go back to a 5 month. Now, what this means is that I'll just take the November 2021 election as an example. So at that election, we will hold the application period open in July, and then we'll find out who the commitments are. They'll know a good 5 months ahead. They can start having that conversation with their communities. Then if they fail in November 2021, they're able to reapply again, rework with their communities, really listen to their communities, reconfigure a bond package, and maybe have success in the May 2021 election. So they couldn't do that under the 9-month election. So this really helps give them a second bite at the election, and hopefully a way to, it's on the front of the mind of the community. They've been talking a lot about it. They change up the bond package a little bit, and then they're successful. And then to address the concern we have of districts just applying and applying and applying, is we've limited them to 2 elections in a row. So they could do November, May, May, November, November, May, whatever. Then they do have to wait 1 election, so that again, if you failed twice, that's your community sending you a notice and a communication that you really need to talk to us some more. Let's go back, let's kind of step back, really address the problems we have and go forward. And also we found for the smaller districts that by shortening it, what we hope is we give them more time to engage with their community, get information, and figure out when will be the best opportunity for them to go for a bond election. We brought this up with our advisory group, and districts big and small, financial advisors, construction experts all thought this was a good idea to move back to the 5-month. And so now we're asking the board to have the first read of these rules and then approval next month. And I'll stop there if there are any questions.
Thank you, Michael. Any questions or comments? Sounds like a great plan.
Thank you very much. Well, I will, again, we've met once with the Rules Advisory Committee and we haven't heard comments from them. This has been generally accepted by our advisory group. I'll continue to receive comments and discussions as I hear if there are changes in the meeting. Otherwise, I will be back in May asking for approval, and I really appreciate your time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michael. Okay, and then next up on the first readings item is the use of polystyrene. I can never pronounce that word right. And we have Kathy Brock and Amanda Rhodes.
Hello, actually Kathy Brock is not here today. I'm Amanda Rhodes, and I believe my director Dustin Melton is here. So good afternoon, Vice Chair and members, and I see Colt Gill, our director. Hello. I have a presentation, so let's see if I can get this going. Let's go with screen 2. And okay. All right. The ODE Child Nutrition Program staff have drafted a rule to codify a statute that becomes effective this July. The statute is very concise, and there's a link to the statute itself on the slide if you would like to read the law itself. The basics of the law passed in 2015 is that it prohibits any school district that provides breakfast or lunch at a school site from using polystyrene foam plates, trays, food containers, or food packaging. It allows for any school district to use polystyrene foam in meal service if a district participates in a recycling program. The law directs ODE to provide extensions for school districts able to show financial hardship experienced from complying with the prohibition on the use of polystyrene materials. In the process to develop this rule, we first reviewed the legislature public documents and the recorded sessions. We then developed a survey to understand the impact of this rule and to guide us on how to proceed. The survey closed in January 2021. Also in January, we held 3 group meetings with an external advisory group. I'll discuss a few details about the survey and a bit about the advisory group as well further on in the presentation. In February, the draft rule created in the advisory group meetings was shown to the Child Nutrition Program staff, and Kathy and I reviewed the feedback with our leadership. The revised draft rule was then presented to the ODE Rules Advisory Committee for more feedback. The incorporated changes from then are in the version presented to you now. The version was also sent out via communication channels to leadership in districts and sponsors of the child nutrition programs. The survey was created as an online Google form that could be completed independently by the target audience, and CMP staff also conducted phone interviews to school districts, ESDs, and charter schools. So the survey results are going to include those, even though now the rule doesn't include ESDs nor charter schools. There were 4 essential purposes to the survey that was conducted. So to develop a baseline to gauge the effectiveness of the law, have a list of those that need assistance transitioning away from the material, understand the nexus of COVID-19 pandemic and this material's use, and finally, to raise awareness about the law. Of these, both number 1 and number 3 have significance for the direction of the rule in regards to accountability and impact. If you want to read the full report on the survey, the link is located at the bottom of the next few slides. One of the most important parts of the survey was to understand whether these products are being used currently. Most of the districts, ESGs, and charter schools answered that they did, and that this is for the majority of their schools. Most respondents also reported that they do have plans to eliminate their use, so that's good. One limitation to the survey was that we did not ask the range of how frequently these schools use these products. Use can range anywhere from all meals being served in these products to rare occasions where the products are used. Our assumptions about the use of polystyrene was confirmed for those that are currently using these products. They're not using them due to the pandemic alone. So in short, this rule will have a widespread impact in terms of the number of institutions affected, given that most are still utilizing polystyrene products. But we do not see the need to have any emergency language allowing continued use beyond the financial hardship extension as permitted in the statute. So in terms of the external advisory group, we had participation from the Department of Environmental Quality, industry leaders, a nonprofit organization, and 2 school district staff who would be directly impacted by this rule. We held 3 group sessions in January. Those meetings have been recorded and there are meeting notes available. We also have information about polystyrene, and particularly styrene residues, which is a major concern for this material. The list of participants and their affiliation can be provided to you if you'd like that information, and we can provide you with any of the other materials that I've gathered in regards to the meetings. Some important points to note that came to our attention were that there's only 1 company in Oregon located in Tigard that would be able to handle recycling polystyrene, and it is not handled at the curbside due to the low volume of the waste overall in Oregon and the high cost of recycling versus creating new products. No waste management facility in Oregon is equipped to handle the supposedly compostable commercial materials. In terms of carbon footprint, a study conducted by the DEQ found that all single-use materials generally produce equal amounts of carbon equivalents for the environment. The American Chemistry Council has determined the levels of styrene residue is far below the acceptable daily intake level established by the FDA based on the assumptions used in the tests. Some decisions that were discussed with the external advisory group for the rule were to include vague language about the financial hardship definition in rule language so that the department can be responsive to district needs. The when, where, and who should include all schools in the district at all times and for the whole campus, which would include all entities that provide prepared foods on the school campuses. ODE will not have oversight for recycling plans or methods, but the definition of recycling is referenced in the rule. Districts should report their use to ODE, but this was relaxed in the most current version that you see. And so that'll just be a report on those who have an approved financial hardship only. Those districts that may have contracted for services and products will be allowed to carry out their obligations to the end of their contract, and violations to the rule, if uncovered, will result in withholding of funds or fines, which again has also been limited in the current rule that you see before you. A meeting was conducted with those responsible for the Division 22 overhaul and ODE rules, where it was decided that this rule would be enumerated in Division 51 as provided in the draft rule. Discussion was had about the rules coordinator, was had with the rules coordinator about expanding the rule to include ESGs and charter schools, but that is not provided for in the statute, so it will be just school districts. Since ODE does not have a current mechanism that can be easily modified to include reporting on polystyrene use, it was determined that general reporting would be limited. Therefore, again, only those approved for a financial hardship waiver would be included in a published list. Another limitation was placed on the rule to keep the violations and penalties to a minimum or completely removed. There's no process or mechanism to uncover noncompliance, but if found, a corrective action plan will be required and ODE will provide technical assistance. The Rules Advisory Committee members that had feedback for us from our presentation on March 11th supported the minimum oversight by ODE for recycling. They provided ideas about what would constitute a financial hardship, such as the condition where a district backfills a deficit for meal services from the general fund, or if there is a supply issue and increased costs of around 5 to 10% more. And finally, 2 members supported the general reporting requirement of all districts, but again, that's not in the rule as written. And my name is Amanda Rhodes, and I'm a child nutrition specialist. And Kathy Brock is also listed as a contact for this rule.
Thank you, Amanda. Are there any questions or comments that we have for Amanda? Director Scarlock.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you so much for your presentation, Amanda. My students are going to be thrilled. So this is something that is important to them and has come up multiple times just throughout their essays and from years past. And so thank you so much for your attention to this matter. And so I just really appreciate this, and I'll be happy to share this with my students. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for the kind comments.
Director Colonna.
Thank you. Amanda, I need to ask if I'm understanding this correctly. Is it true that the law went in, or the rule went into effect in 2015, but this is a request for extensions to the rule that give more flexibility and options for school districts?
Great question. So the statute was passed in 2015, and in there it directed ODE to create a rule. And so this is the rule, which is detailing certain elements that we thought were important to put in rule. And so part of that is the extension in regards to a financial hardship. So that is the extension piece, which is we were shooting for a year. And so if they apply for an extension via financial hardship, they will have to prove it and then be approved, and then it'll be approved only for the school year.
Amanda, so again, what our decision is going to be when we vote is whether we move forward with the extensions. And if we, and the, what do I want to call them? And flexibility. Otherwise, if we don't, the rule stays as it is without those extensions and flexibility. Is that correct? Is that what our decision is?
So the extension is written in the statute. And so the particulars of that just need to be worked out. And part of that is detailing it in rule. And so the financial hardship is something that was written into statute and was a big reason why the law passed back in 2015.
Okay. I have a follow-up as well. What would be the reasoning for why ESDs and charter schools wouldn't follow this?
So we made the final decision because it just wasn't explicitly stated in the statute.
Okay. I'd just like to give an opinion at this point. I'm certainly going to keep an open mind, but you know, so often to me, it seems as though the environment always kind of gets this short shift on things. We've been through 4 years of some brutal rollbacks in the environment, and polystyrene is not something that degrades over time well. It's like plastic, and animals ingest it. We don't have to use it. It seems to me that here's another one of those situations where we're doing the easier wrong instead of the harder right. And I know that we don't have any say on legislative issues that come to us in terms of whether we would recommend that they be implemented or not. But this is one of those, it just seems to me we're headed in the wrong direction from everything we know about what is happening to Mother Earth. And this again, to me, I can't understand personally why we would use any of these products at all anymore, let alone look at more flexibility to allow us to utilize them. And Heidi, I would hope from a district point of view, not that I want you to agree with a thing that I'm saying, but if you would be willing at some point during this discussion to talk from a superintendent's point of view on how this might affect your own district, both positive and negative. Thank you, everybody, for putting up with my rant. I apologize.
Thank you very much, Jerry, for the comments. I think they're very valuable, as always. Heidi has her hand up, and I don't know that I saw any other ones. Please, Heidi.
Jerry, I agree with and I appreciate your passion wholeheartedly, but I can say that in order to do so, our district had to put forth quite a bit of effort, including some remodeling pieces, as well as additional staffing so that we could do the washing of trays and all of that in our system. And then also supplies have been really limited during COVID. And so that has been especially challenging. And as we've been having to package a whole lot more from child nutrition, because we are an in-house operation, we have had to reach out to suppliers that we never imagined previously. So I think a lot of what you're describing is absolutely accurate. It's just there's some stresses on the system that are especially challenging right now, and that different schools and different systems, different locations will just have different access to so many different things.
Thank you, Superintendent Sipe. I don't see any other hands, so I want to offer a comment as well and echo what Jerry has indicated. I think oftentimes we make these decisions as cost savings or whatever the shortening of the process might be. And in the end, we know where we're headed with regard to our environment and the impact that even the use of material like this one will have on the environment. So I every day I wonder, I've done so much in my own personal life to try to reduce the carbon footprint. But every day when I go out into the world, you can't help but see the impact of and the amount of plastic, of materials, petroleum-based materials that are so harmful and detrimental to the environment. I was curious and intrigued by the study that you mentioned, Amanda, that was done by, forgive me, I cannot remember what agency. You said that the carbon footprint between the use of any type of single-use product is similar in impact. I am really intrigued by that and would like to know more. Maybe if you could share that with us. I don't know if you linked it on the presentation, But I would be curious and interested in seeing how that plays out. I know that even studies are sometimes biased, and so I would love to see what it says. So if you don't mind sharing, that would be great. It doesn't have to be right now, but after the meeting would be fantastic.
Yeah, that was the Department of Environmental Quality.
Yeah, DEQ. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions on this topic? If not, we will see Amanda back, I believe next month or sometime in the future. Okay, I do want to go back to the Brandy. Brandy had a comment that she wanted to make on the previous presentation, but she had internet issues. So I want to give her some time to insert her comment because I think it's important on the awesome program.
Thank you, Vice Chair Zapata. I apologize, and I'll be brief. I just wanted to point out that as a school board member, that awesome grant was incredibly helpful in campaigning for the successful passage of our bond in November in Newburgh. And I really wanted to say thank you to Michael, he's no longer on the call, I don't think, but for having flexibility for districts to be able to utilize that and to potentially change the process a little bit in response to making it more sustainable and easier for districts to access, because it is an incredibly important program.
Thank you for sharing that, Brandy. I think firsthand experience is hyper valuable in all of this. Okay, well, if there are no other questions, the last two items under the first readings portion of the agenda are submitted as written reports only and will come before the board again for potential action. Dockets are available on Board Book. Corey is happy to coordinate if any members have questions. And if no other comments or questions, then we have reached the end of today's agenda. And thank you all for your participation today. And especially thank you so much for the stumbling and your patience with me today. And the next meeting for the State Board of Education will be on Thursday, May 20th. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you so much.
You did a great job chairing. Well done.
You did. Vice Chair.
Nice job.